So, welcome to the special meeting of the Lake Forest City Council, February 27, 2018. Thank you for those of you who took the time to come here and for those thousands of you watching online. We're going to start a little differently today with an introductory video that the management staff have put together.
Welcome to the City of Lake Forest City Council meeting. We are happy you are here to participate in this important city function. If you have not done so already, please take an agenda to follow along and see what will be discussed during tonight's meeting. Also, please help yourself to some coffee and cookies available. City Council meetings have several parts: the invocation, the Pledge of Allegiance, a report from the student liaison, presentations, public comment, warrant register, consent calendar, public hearings, discussion or action items, city manager's report, and city council comments. The public comment period of the meeting allows members of the public to address the city council regarding any items within subject matter jurisdiction of the meeting. No action may be taken on items not listed on the agenda unless authorized by law. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person, and an overall time limit of 30 minutes is allocated for the public comments portion of the agenda. Any person wishing to address the City Council on any matter, whether or not it appears on the agenda for this meeting, is requested to complete a request to speak form available at the side bins to the right of the dais. After completing your form, please submit it to the staff sitting next to the city clerk prior to speaking to the council. When you are called to speak, please step up to the front podium and address the city council with your comments. You will see 3 lights: green to speak, yellow when you have 1 minute left, and red when your time has expired. At that time, your public comment period has ended and you are required to conclude your comments and save any further general comments for a future meeting. The same process should be followed if you wish to speak about an item on the agenda. You will address the City Council when that item is being discussed. The City Council meeting is being recorded and available for viewing online live or at a later time through the city's website and on Facebook Live. If you are watching the meeting via live stream through Facebook Live, you can submit written comments to be read aloud during the public comment period. The City of Lake Forest thanks you for your time and attendance at the City Council meeting. We hope you enjoy the meeting.
Okay, premiere, we should have had popcorn. What happened to the popcorn? So that was put together by Skylar and Brett and Jonathan, who aren't here tonight, so thank you very much. That segment replaces what the mayor normally would read before the meeting gets started. And they added a couple of things as well. Tonight's invocation will be done by Mayor Pro Tem Basil.
You'll bow your heads, please. Father God, we thank you for a beautiful day. Thank you for this wonderful weather. We much needed this rain. I pray, God, for your blessings over everyone that's here. I pray for blessings for all those that are driving home. Please, Lord, keep them safe, keep them happy, and, Lord, let us make the right decisions tonight on this council, things that will benefit the city and its residents. And, Lord, always have us keep our minds clear, that we're focused on the issue at hand with no ulterior motives except to do what is best for the residents. In your precious name we pray. Amen.
And the Pledge of Allegiance will be led by Council Member Robinson.
You join me in standing and place your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now we get to the public comment portion of the evening. I have to apologize to everybody who was here or anybody who watched it online for what happened at the last meeting. Council member yelled at a resident, said some unkind words, and also interrupted them. We believe there should be a safe environment, one in which you're coming here free to criticize the staff, the council, or anyone. And I regret that that happened, and I assure you I do my best for that not to happen again. This is your city hall. We're elected by you, the people, and we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard of conduct than would normally happen. So with that, I'll hear public comments. Do we have any speakers?
Yes, Your Honor. Heiko Peschel.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council folks, and the city staff. Life is a two-edged sword. If our speakers would treat our council a little bit more respectfully, I think it would be easier for the council to relax and not to get too excited about it. But that's life, and you can't always have what you want. Anyway, I notice we have a big schedule, big thing on the agenda. I'd like to speak on that later on. So for right now, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Kenton Benchner.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you. Close enough, Betcher, but that's okay. That's okay. And I actually go by Ken a lot of times. Kenton is my formal name. Unfortunately, I go by Ken because a little 6-year-old was expecting Kenton, and when Kenton showed up, you've never seen such a look of disappointment. But anyway, I'm here to talk about the strategic plan, so I may talk again. Of course, Whispering Hills, which has been my favorite for the past 5 years, and about possibly moving it a little closer into the activity, at least the design, so we come up with a number and a plan.
Whispering Hills, I hate to interrupt you, but Whispering Hills is on the agenda.
Yes.
This is public comment for non-agenda item.
Oh, okay. Then I will.
No 2 bites of the apple.
Oh, okay. Should I come back?
Yeah, come back when it's on the agenda item.
I will do that.
Yeah, just for the general information of everybody, public comments are for items that are not agendized, and if it's an agenda item, you can speak on that.
Okay. I'll save my 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, and that brings us to the workshop item, the 5-year strategic business plan submitted by the city manager. And can we have a report on that? There'll be a report, and after that, we'll open it up for public comments.
Mayor and members of the council, we have a presentation for you tonight, the majority of which will be given by our Assistant City Manager, Keith Neves. But I will start with the opening slide. We practiced this, obviously. All right. So for those of you in the audience who aren't familiar with our strategic planning process, this is something that we do every 2 years, and it's meant to give a 5-year outlook for the financial health of the city. And we've been doing this for several years now, and so this is just one snapshot in time. We will do another strategic plan and update in 2 years. So any of the decisions you make tonight, especially those that are in the out years, are subject to being either moved forward in time or moving later in time, depending on the financial outlook of the city at the time. We started with our first workshop where the council was encouraged to add multiple projects without really talking about the financial implications of the projects. As well as staff, we provided a list of projects that the council could look at and consider for potentially funding over the next 5 years. So tonight is the night where we give you the information on what are your, how much money you have for your projects, and what might the spending plan look like if you were to program some of those for funding. And so tonight we're really looking for you to prioritize the projects that are listed in the general fund. And that is the only fund that the city has where you have a lot of freedom in how you can spend that. And so based on your input tonight, we will bring back a strategic plan which includes the financial projections based on the revenues and expenditures and what happens to them based on the projects and the programs that you tell us tonight that you'd like to see funded. So with that, I will turn it over to Keith.
Mayor, members of the City Council, tonight I'll go through the financial section of the 5-year plan and try to show you some projected balances and revenue and expenditure so you can get a better idea. So when you are making those decisions later tonight, we can do it in a sound financial way. So we'll move forward with the presentation. You know, staff projected revenues and expenditures in the general fund for the upcoming 5-year period. A lot of these projections have cost drivers attached to them. So going out through the 5 years, we have cost drivers attached to both personnel, to contracts, operations, and maintenance. In the 5-year projection right now, we do have a couple things in there. Portola Park maintenance. We know we're going to be building a park up in Portola Hills soon. We have new civic center staff coming in. We have, with the build out of the OSA and the new homes, we might need some more OC sheriff deputies for the police department. And then, of course, some public works staff to help us take care of the brand new civic center. So what I'd like to show you is a 5-year projection of where the city will be in 5 years. And if you look at the graph on the television screen and on your PowerPoint presentations, it shows our current fiscal year, 17-18. As you see, we brought you a balanced budget and you adopted a balanced budget. You had about a $500,000 surplus. And then I have projections going into the 17-18 mid-year, which we will bring you next Tuesday night. Those projections show us going a little upside down. Now, the biggest portion of that is one-time payoff from CalPERS. That's what drives that red line above the blue line, is the CalPERS payoff back in September. So we just use one-time revenue from fund balance. It's not an ongoing structural deficit. A couple of things on the revenue side that have bumped up is the OSA and permits. Not only are the permits coming in a little bit more than what we originally projected, and some permit fees, but we also have 3 hotels that are going to pull permits before the end of the year, before June 30th. So that's what's driving the revenue line up a little bit. And then we have some 2 more developers starting a lot of grading. That is Portola Northeast, and then on the Serrano Summit site, Lennar is going to start grading this month on the Serrano Summit site. So that's where you see the jump in both expenditures and revenue for what we will bring to you next Tuesday for the mid-year review. And then moving forward to the fiscal year 18-19 year, staff is currently building that budget with the city manager and all the departments. And right now we show a positive surplus, about $1 million moving forward in that budget. But that does not include anything that might be proposed or voted on tonight by the City Council to put in that budget. So just, there's about $1 million surplus going into 18-19. Now we get into 19-20, that's when the real expenditures start to hit. That's when the Civic Center personnel is put in. That's when the additional deputies for the build-out of the OSA was projected to be put in. Now we can slide that down another year, push it out another year, push it up another year, but that's the year we've always had where we think, 70-80% of the OSA would be built out. And then another big cost driver in this whole thing is the sheriff's contract. We've got the first estimate. I went to the downtown to sit with all the finance directors last week with the sheriff department, and the first estimate, which is pretty much the final estimate, they're not reducing it much anymore, is 5.5%, $866,000 increase for the sheriff's contract. And what I have projected going out all the way to 21-22 is we have 5.5% for 18-19, and then we have 5% going all the way out. Now that's just a projection. It can come in more than that, it can come in less. But the one thing that's over the Sheriff's Department right now is contract negotiations will start, and we will see something in 1920. The labor negotiations will start happening because those current contracts are ending this year. So what's driving our lines to cross at the end is one of the biggest drivers in the city right now is that sheriff's contract. It's a $17 million contract going up 5% a year. It's by 21, 22, 22, 23, it's going to be well over a $20 million contract. And those expenditures going up at 5.5%, 6% are going up faster than our revenue in our general fund. So that's kind of a picture going out for 5 years. As I said, what is causing the revenue expenditure gap? That's the OC Sheriff's contract, adding new deputies, and then, of course, the new Civic Center staffing. All those things are the driving force for kind of getting a little upside down. Now, in 21-22, we're only upside down by about $7,000. We're not real upside down. So there's ways to structurally fix this, but we still need to keep a good eye on the Sheriff's contract. New general fund expenditures. All proposed, I'm going to read this and I'm going to say this a few times tonight while we're going through the discussions on what new programs and projects we need to put into the 5-year strategic plan. All new programs, proposed projects and programs must be considered within the context of the city's one-time and reoccurring revenues. So we do have a fund balance, and that is one-time revenues. If we are adding stuff with reoccurring revenues, that means those reoccurring costs are going to, be spread out into the future, and they're going to happen every year in every budget we adopt. So we got to be very careful when we're picking new programs and projects on adding a lot of reoccurring revenue. Because if you go back to the graph, in 5 years, we're 4 years really, because 17-18 is the current fiscal year in. So 4 years, we turn a little upside down. So the proposed general fund unrestricted fund balance as of June 30th, 2018 right now is $23.5 million. So when we go back and we start going through the projects, there's $23.5 million of unrestricted fund balance in the general fund. And you might look at me and say, well, Keith, you take me treasurer reports and it says $140 million. Well, a lot of that is one-time capital money in restricted funds for restricted purposes. So what I'm showing you tonight is unrestricted money that can be used for anything the City Council really wants to program it for or have projects for. And then the total cost of the 19 proposed programs and projects in the general fund is $33.5 million over the 5-year plan. So if you look at those two numbers, 23.5 and then the proposed projects at 33.5, of course we would say we don't have enough money to do them all. So we're going to have to make some decisions tonight. Now I'd like to go through a couple of the capital funds, because in the staff report we showed you a table with the general fund, new programs and projects that are being considered. I'd like to talk a little bit about each of the capital funds. The first one is the gas tax, Measure M, and the new SB1. These funds are all restricted for public street maintenance. The city currently uses these funds on street maintenance and street resurfacing. A little thing, even with the new SB1 revenue of approximately $1.5 million, so this year we will receive, not this year, in 18-19 we will start receiving the new SB1 funds, which is about $1.5 million more a year than we would receive through the gas tax. So we get an additional $1.5 million. The city is, for the, we're talking about the ADPCI and going, keeping our streets resurfaced at ADPCI. We would, even with the new 1.5.
Could you explain, people may not know what PCI means.
I'll get Tom to explain that. My Public Works Director.
Thank you, Mayor, and council members and members of the public, certainly. So every 2 years we evaluate the condition, the pavement condition of every street in the city, and that's called a pavement condition index. And we've got a a nice thick book where we drive every single street in the city and weigh that down, and then from that we have a software program that we utilize throughout every city in Orange County that can help project the pavement life and how much it's deteriorating, how much preventative maintenance and how much maintenance you can put into these streets to make them a certain condition. So anything, certainly 80 is there's a scale, 100 being the best, 0 being the worst. We have good streets right now, one of the best in the county, but it's trending down. At the current rate, we'd be at a PCI level of 75 in 5 years. And then the council at the last strategic meeting talked about keeping it at an 80 level or a very good level.
Okay, thanks. I just wanted people to understand what he was talking about.
So currently, we spend about $1.3 million for the major M2 funds on street resurfacing. With the addition of the SB1 money, we're more than double what we spend on street resurfacing, up to about 2.8. But it's still, even at $2.8 million a year and almost double what we currently spend, under the model, under Tom's model on the PCI, we'll need to spend about $4.3 million a year. So we're still about $1.8 million short to get to that 80 PCI and stay at that 80 PCI. And that $1.8 million would need to come back from the general fund. So just keep that in mind when we go back to the general fund and discuss those programs and projects. Now, the Capital Improvement Projects Fund is just all cities set up a Capital Improvement Projects Fund. That's where you shift money out of your general fund and store it there for future capital improvement projects outside of all your other restricted capital funds. So the city currently uses these funds on various city projects. There are sufficient funds for the proposed projects in the 5-year plan in this capital fund that you see in your document tonight. And then the general fund and grants are really the only two funding sources of this fund. The capital fund, it's either a transfer from the general fund each year, or every 2 years, or every 3 years, or grant funding sources take up a lot of the funding in these funds. Park Development Fund, the city currently uses these for funds on various park projects. There are sufficient funds for the proposed projects. The 2 projects that are coming out of the Park Development Fund, one that was previously approved, that's Veterans Park, and then Portola Park will come out of the Park Development Fund. Just a reminder, though, this is development impact fees is the only funding source for this fund. It's one-time money. Once developer comes and goes, that's all you have. We'll have enough to build both Veterans Park and Portola Park, but then that fund will basically come down to about a 0 balance at the end of it. So there's really not an ongoing funding source unless there's additional development in the city. City's Replacement Fund, Facilities Replacement Fund. The city created this fund in this fiscal year, 2017, 2018, for future replacement of old and new facilities. Knowing that we just 2.5 years ago finished building a sports park with a rec center on there, pretty big rec center, and knowing that we're building the Civic Center with 4 new buildings, a community center, senior center, and performing arts / council chambers and administrative building, we created a new facilities fund this year, and we transferred money into it. There are sufficient funds in this proposal for the 2 projects that are in this 5-year plan. As it says up there, yes, staff transferred roughly $2.5 million of impact fees into this fund for this current fiscal year to start so we could have a long-term solution for our facilities going out into the future. Now, will this fund all the fixes going out in the future? No. We will need to find some revenue or a funding source to help keep funding this into the future at some point in time. But this is a good start that will get us started on building, our replacement schedules, our facilities replacement schedules and models so that we can move forward with replacing things at the right time in the current time of all the city assets. we've talked about this in a few council meetings. LIFTM, one of our favorite subjects, Lake Forest Transportation Mitigation Funds. There are sufficient funds in the LIFTM fund for the proposed projects in the current 5-year plan. Developer impact fees, this was created with the city ordinance for the original 5 OSA developers, that they would pay a impact fee for traffic on certain intersections throughout the city. It's one-time money for those specific projects, and it's outlined in the city code. So you cannot move this money or spend this money outside of those intersections that it was meant for. This is another funding source, Foothill Circulation Phasing Plan, FCPP funds, used for paying a portion of the debt service on the Alton Parkway bond issue. This is a county-run fee program. It was started in 1987. It's still going today. It gets paid off building permits as they get pulled. This is how we built Alton Parkway. We issued a bond, but it's not fully paid for by FCPP. It's paid 72% by FCPP and 28% by the general fund. So what we have done is the first 72% of this is going to be paid by FCPP, and then at the last 4 years, we will need to shift over and pay the remaining debt service from the general fund. Now, we could think about paying off this bond. The first date to pay off the bond is 12/1/2018, and the general fund would need to contribute $3.2 million, and FCPP would contribute $3.4 million. It'd give you the $6.6 million on that payoff date. That is the earliest payoff date in the bond documents. That does come with a premium, a $65,000 premium, but that's in the numbers of the 3.2 and the 3.4. Just a consideration going into the future, you'd save about $1 million in interest over the remaining 7 years of the bond. So below we have a few of the larger dollar, right now we're going to try to go back in the staff report to the general fund expenditures, and I mean the general fund proposed projects, and start walking through them. Some of the items from the table number 3 in the report the staff is looking for direction on. These are some of the little bigger items. The pavement condition index. Do we want to stay at an 80 PCI, or are we down to a 75 PCI, or do we want to go higher than an 80 PCI? The neighborhood park improvement plan. Currently, we have about $7 million budgeted for that, for the 10 revamp of the parks. Whispering Hills Park. There's roughly $5.5 million there. Normandale Park, and then of course another big one is was brought up at the strategic plan when we had a workshop back in September, is park security guards at parks. So right now I will turn it back over to the city manager, and then we can move forward.
Okay, as I mentioned, we are looking feedback specifically on the general fund expenditures, and once we get excuse me, all the feedback from the council, we will come back in June with a draft of the plan for your consideration, and then it will come back for you for adoption with the operating budget in the second meeting of June. So again, we're all here to answer questions, and at this point I will turn it back over to the mayor.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open it up for public comments, both here and then online. Then I'll have the council ask very general questions, but then as the assistant mayor said, we'll wade through the numbers. So we've got 40-something items to go through. I don't want to talk about them and then lay back and vote on them, so we'll just go ahead and plow through them unless there are some general questions first. But let's begin with public comments from the people who are here, and then public comments, if we have any, from the people who are online.
Ken Betchner, followed by Heiko Pesch.
Betcher, but that That's close enough. Thank you. I'm here again as my standard talk about Whispering Hills Park as a community garden park. And I saw that in the strategic plan when we had the first workshop, it was in year 3 and 4, which is sort of out of the money. And my thought was if we could just move it 1 year closer, at least the design, the $50,000 for the design and the workshop. As far as the city's efforts, I think mostly it would be consultant effort. But at the end of that 2-year, we would at least have a better idea of the design and really the costs. The $5.5 million that was mentioned, that was put in as the development cost, is really a standard average of a park site, and this isn't really a standard or average park. The consultant in the third workshop came up with $1.7 million. And again, whether that's a real number or not, we don't know. And so we're not going to have a real number until we do it. And so I'd like to see it just moved forward a year, so in 2 years. And then in the second 2 years from now, when we review it again, we'll have a real concrete piece to work with. So that's my request. And it will also open up avenues that we can shop it around to foundations or sponsorships, that we have a real concrete plan and maybe help defray some of the costs through that type of effort. So I thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next. We know who it is.
Heiko Peschel, followed by John Theorich.
Heiko Peschel, 4 Perel Avenue, Foothill Ranch. You know that area up there in the hills. Good evening, Mr. Mayor again, council and staff. What I really like and what the city has done very well is the amount of on and off street trails, not only for bicycling, which I like, but also for walking and hiking. There's equestrian. I'd like to see the city continue that in that line, keep that up. In another direction, in the direction of public works, I'd like to keep the condition of our pavement in at 80% or better. Just came back from Costco in Irvine. Irvine has not done a very good job of maintaining the pavement in that area. If you ever go shop there, you go down lower part of Alton and then that area around there, and it looks old. It looks like it's been 10, 12 years since anybody's done anything. In general, I think the city's heading in a good direction. I'd like to see them do that, keep going in that direction. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next.
John Theorich.
Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Great to talk with you and appreciate all of your work that you're doing. It's really great to see the Whispering Hills Park on the agenda as part of the general plan. And I'd like to say that, you know, as a 31-year resident in Whispering Hills, that I would really like to really appreciate the work that you're all going to do to try to move this forward, because that money was set aside at one time many years ago. It's now been, I think, over 22 years. The money was set aside for that park to be developed, and now we need to kind of get back in line with where we were in terms of getting that park back on track. So I'd like to commend Kenton's idea of being able to push that forward, and thank you again for all the work on all the other great parks that I enjoy, Pittsford and Normandale Park. I use those all the time, but I'd like to have that park right down below where I live to be available to all of us to enjoy, for the older folks as well as for the kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
We've had no further requests.
Anyone online?
No, Your Mayor.
Okay, then, Council, do you have any general questions? We're going to go through all 40 items one by one, and so hold your questions about those items, but any general items? Yeah, Councilman Robbins.
So I appreciate the presentation, kind of talking about expenditures over the next 5 years. I'm curious as to whether or not we expect any cost reductions in any particular area. And so I'll just throw out one where I've heard that we should see some reductions over time, which would be in the planning department, because we have so much activity going on with the OSA, that over time we would expect some potential cost cuts in that particular area through attrition or whatever it might be, and not having the need. I know that we also have a lot of contracts. I also understand that for the most part that's a neutral situation where we're generating dollars from developers and then using those dollars to pay fees. But just wondering if there's some areas where we would expect some cuts, and if you could elaborate on the planning side.
Yes, in development services, we have, probably $350,000, $400,000 worth of professional services that would be contracts that would not be needed once the OSA has, starts winding down and starts going away, and the development starts going away. In a couple of the other departments, we'll go back to development services. The Interwest contract is a 55-45 split, so we have a little more revenue than we do expenditures in the department. So when that starts going away, it's going to go away proportionally, but it's going to be taking away revenue at a greater rate than it's going to be taking away expenditures. But there is some professional and consulting services contracts over there. Same with public works. We have engineer. One of the biggest drivers of this development is both in public works and development services. Public works has engineering fees, which you'll see next week in the mid-year, need to go up again, and that's close to $2 million. And then, of course, we budget the same amount almost in the Public Works Department budget, but some of those are one for one. But there are contracts in both departments that would go away because you wouldn't need those services, those inspectors out on the job sites inspecting all that's going on within the OSA development. So yes, we do have some costs. We don't have them being taken out in this 5-year, because this 5-year has this year as being the current plan, and 4 more years we think we have probably at least 3.5, maybe the 4 years until this total OSA is winding down completely.
Okay, well, maybe at our next 2-year CIP strategic plan, maybe if you could update us on where that is, so just put a tickler in now so that we can better understand that and what impacts there might be. So that was the only question that I have. I've got plenty on the specific items.
Yeah, no, I know, I'm sure. Any other general questions? I had if nobody else has, I had a couple. Does this, that terrible graph that shows the red and the blue perilously close to each other, does that take into account a recession in the next 5 years?
It's not taking into account a recession. There are cost drivers in there for contracts, for operating expenditures going up, for everything, but it does not take into account. I have not reduced any year for revenues that would be going down in a recession.
And how about the future CalPERS payoffs? So we're at 100%, and we like to be at 100%, and CalPERS keeps coming back to us every 2 years, asking for more money. Does that projection have in it the next CalPERS bite?
No, I do not have the next CalPERS bite. If we look at what we just paid off last September for CalPERS, and with them earning a positive 11.2 in 16-17 and a positive so far this year, let's knock on wood, that would probably take us 3 years, almost to the last year of this 5-year plan. And with those positives and with us paying it off, they still have to reduce all the way down to 7%, and some mortality rates are still coming in. But I think we could still be fully funded unless something else in the market kind of implodes.
The other general question I had was, you dropped the sheriff raise from 5.5 this year to 5. Were you just being kind to us, or was there some rationale to that?
There was a little bit of rationale behind that. That was a 5-year plan that the sheriff did last year. That this was the last year of what was negotiated in the last MOUs. So until we figure out what's newly negotiated in any more new MOUs, they actually had it going down to 3.5. to almost 3.25, then 2.77 in our last 3 years. But we know that's not going to happen because they're going and negotiating right now. So I actually raise it above what their 5-year plan said.
Okay, and the other, no, that'll come up when we do the PCIs. Any more general questions?
Yeah, I have one on the Foothill circulation phase. In your PowerPoint, you actually have 3.2. You mentioned a 3.4 with a total of 6.6 total. Do we have the funds for the 6.6? Is that what the total payoff will be?
The projection right now for the FCPP, and I didn't apologize about that. That 3.4 should be in there. Yes, projected on building permits being pulled, and with 3 hotels pulling building permits before the end of the year because they would pay into the FCPP fund, that we will have sufficient funds by next December 1st, 2018 on the FCPP. Now, we will have sufficient funds to pay off that side of it. It's the council's discretion if we wanted to reach into the general fund reserves and set aside $3.2 million of general fund dollars to pay the whole thing off.
So that we'll have the money on December 1st of this year to pay off total on that.
The projections, yes.
The other question I have,
unless something, the whole economy stops and homes stop being built.
So the SB1 additional money, we have 1.5 million more coming into the city because
starting in fiscal year 18-19.
18-19. Okay, and that's added with the measure 2, 1.3.
Yes, currently we get about $1.3 million a year from M2. This will be an additional $1.5 million for SB1. So that that gives you about $2.8 million of money that you could use for what we're planning. What staff has told City Council at the strategic plan is the additional SB1 money would all be used for street resurfacing.
So as we're looking at whether it was 75 or 80, do we have enough with that money to keep it at 75?
You will have to ask the Public Works Director that question.
We'll go into that. That's the specifics, so we're going to go into that.
I have a quick question.
Thank you.
Sure.
Just to clarify, the FCPP, is that going to be pulling from the general plan? I know you said that there's going to be contracts, permits will be pulled, and that money will be accessible through the FCPP program. If those, if we're not getting those permits pulled as we expected, will we be pulling from the general plan to pay off the $3.2 million? How is that going to play out?
Well, there was always the expectation that if there wasn't, if you wanted to pay this off early, that's the earliest date you can pay off this bond issue. This bond issue started in 2010, issued these bonds. You could pull all the money from the general fund and then just reimburse the general fund as FCPP funds came in. So if you did not have enough. Right now, the projections with the hotels coming in and with the other building and what we're seeing going through the end of this year is we should have sufficient funds to fund this.
So we have a $10 million shortfall between what we want to accomplish and what's available in the general plan. What you're saying is this $3.2 million that is proposing to be paid off, hypothetically, if we decide to pay it off, that's not part of our $10 million.
That's not part of that $33 million, and then, yes, okay. Correct.
Okay, then let's plow through. Can we put up table 1 so the people who are here can get a better idea of what we're talking about? And just for your information, somebody said something was out of the money. And what they're referring to there is right now we're more or less committing to the next 2 years, but there'll be another strategic planning workshop, hopefully a better one, in 2 years' time, and they will re-scramble the cake or re-scramble the eggs. So that right now, things in 3, 4, and 5 are all subject to being renegotiated by the next strategic planning. So tonight we're really focused on years 1 and 2, and that's what she'll bring back to us for the budget meetings. Anyhow, table 1. I'll move acceptance of table 1. Do I have a second? And comments or questions?
I have a question. Looking at the cost for the Performing Arts Center and the Community Center with the salaries in question, I'm wondering if there's been any thought to offering programs within like the local high schools in the area, see if there are students that would be willing to come in and volunteer some hours in the Performing Arts Center or even the Community Center because a lot of the high schools have the they need credits for high school. Is there a way we can maybe create some sort of program to get staffed with some volunteers and maybe kind of offset some of the costs for salaries?
Thank you for the question, Mayor Pro Tem, members of council. We could certainly look at that as a short answer. We generally plan all of our programming probably about 4 months in advance. That's so that we can get out in the brochure. So we would need volunteer commitments that far in advance, and they would need to be really solid commitments where we would be able to negotiate something and know that they're going to come through. But I'm always open to looking at something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, just a follow-up to that. If those were year 2 items, I would have gone into more detail about how much we're staffing and why we're staffing. The fact that they're year 3 items, I was less worried about it. So I do share your concerns, though, about those figures. Any other questions or comments on Table 1?
If I may.
Sure.
I just wanted to comment on the community center and performing arts staffing. We really worked hard to try to consolidate as much as we can. So that staff is going to be shared between those 2 buildings. So the 2 buildings aren't going to have individual staffing like the senior center will. In addition, we built in the community center not being open 7 days a week. So this is giving you 6 days a week. And the reason we did that was we wanted to learn from our experience from the sports park, where we just programmed, and our community center really got beat up. And so by being closed on Monday, our plan is we'll have 1 full day to inspect the facility, make any necessary repairs, and so forth, so that on Tuesday when it opens up, it looks just as good as when we opened. And so that's part of the plan behind these numbers and the staffing that we're suggesting.
Okay, thank you. Then, sure.
I do have a question. This would be directed to Lieutenant Valentine. Lieutenant Valentine, with the new housing and the extra acreage and housing in the north end of our city, is 2 deputies enough for us to maintain a high presence in the rest of the city?
I wouldn't be able to, Mayor and council members, that's trying to predict the future. Based on the workload, calls for service, 2 deputies is enough to apply to the current calls for service and see how that stabilizes things, see how it impacts, and then we can reanalyze and go from there. But that's, in talking with the city manager and working with Keith, that seems to be a fair starting point.
Thank you. Has this been moved and seconded?
Yeah, we're now in the discussion.
Just want to make
a
couple comments. First, with respect to the staffing at the senior center and the community center, I'd really like the Park and Recs Commission to take a look at those hours, those days and hours of operation. I know I've had a number of, I won't call them, I'll say people being frustrated. There's a good way of putting it, that on particular holidays that the sports park isn't open, and those are days when they're off and the kids are out of school and there's a lot of opportunities and for them, but they want to go to the sports park, they want to enjoy some of the facilities, not just the outside open air parts. I think at the very least just bathroom accessibility is really important, and I think that's been a challenge at certain times, so if we can just have the Park and Recs Commission take a look at that. And then, I think that'll do it.
Yeah, I think there's a larger discussion on all of these items, and that sometime we're going to have to deal with, and that is just what exactly are we doing at the senior center? What is our performing arts center? It's why I don't take these numbers all that seriously, because I don't think we've actually engaged in that discussion, or what are we doing there? So to some extent, they're in year 3, so I'm not worried that we'd have to have that discussion now, but we have a lot of work in defining the expectation. Who are we bringing in for performing arts, and what's it going to generate, and how much programming are we going to give to our seniors? So I think the year 3 items are less of a concern to me, because we have time to figure out all these other things. I agree with you. Ultimately, it needs to go to Parks and Recreation, but they're going to turn around to us and say, well, what do you want? So to some extent, we've got to be able to say, listen, we want the most dynamic senior program that's ever existed, and we want full concerts, or it's okay the way we're doing it. Let's until we tell them what we're looking for, I'm not sure they can come back and tell us the best plan.
Sure, and I'm kind of using the sports park example as we look at the existing facilities. I think that's why whenever you could put it on their agenda, it would be a good discussion. I look at their agendas, a lot of times it doesn't have a whole lot on it. So, I think just finding ways of getting feedback from the community. I don't have an idea that I want to push on them, because I don't think that's right. It's if I personally want to see the sports park open on Memorial Day, but it's closed, okay, that's just me. But, I want to hear what the residents think, and so, some way of garnering that information through the most cost-effective way doing it. Maybe it's online surveys, who knows what it might be, but, giving them the opportunity to, actually take some leadership on that particular issue, because I have heard some feedback, and I think that issue is only going to be exacerbated by additional facilities that will have. It's the first time that I heard that we'd be closed potentially one day, and so, I just want to make sure we understand the ramifications of that and don't have a bunch of people who, on Mondays when we're closed, are sending ALF tickets saying, hey, City Council, you built this, in their words, maybe like Taj Mahal, and then you lock it on me, So.
Come to our house instead.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, that's actually scheduled to go to the Parks and Recreation Commission at their March meeting. We have put quite a bit of work into figuring out the staffing model and then the hours and the specific services that we would be offering, that we're proposing. So we have a bit of detail to share with the commission and eventually with the council.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Table 2's not a table, actually, it's a figure. But in any event, it's just a figure, so there's nothing to do on Table 2. Table 3.
Mayor, did you want to vote on that first
Oh, didn't
round?
we vote on
You
that
had a
already?
first and a second.
Okay. Let's vote, please. Thank you for catching that.
That motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Table 3 has several hundred items in it. And let's start at the top. Community Choice Aggregation Study. And maybe, City Manager, you could take a second just to tell people what those words mean. Or Carla.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. The Community Choice Aggregation Study was requested by the City Council. It's a feasibility study that would examine the potential of the city maybe forming an outside, a new agency that would purchase energy directly from suppliers to save costs for residents and businesses.
And we approved that, huh?
You approved going out to RFP. You've had it on your agenda a couple of times, and so now we're slated to come back to you with a contract at the second meeting in March.
Okay. Well, just to get it on the boards, I'll make a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Discussion?
I'm sure this question came up, and if there are people that are wondering the same, $60,000, that's funds that we're paying up front to have someone come in and evaluate. What kind of ROI are we expecting with this investment?
That would be what we'd find out in the feasibility study. That would be part of the deliverable.
We're going to spend $60,000 to find out that we're not saving anything.
Well, the residents and businesses of Lake Forest can save between 4% and 8% in actual user fees, because the fact is that we're actually getting our electricity at a more stable and regular cost. And that's what the study would, I think, show.
Any other comments? All right, yeah, that seemed, yeah, okay, let's vote. We have a second, first and second. Let's vote.
Yeah.
That motion carries with Mayor Gardner opposed.
Okay, number 2, business marketing. It's $8,000 a year for the next 4 years. And could you briefly explain what you're going to use that money for?
So this would be additional funds for economic development to hire a consultant to help us with some direct marketing efforts. So what we mean by that is marketing to site selectors, developers, joint partnerships that can help us reposition some existing shopping centers and create some potential economic development opportunities by casting a very, very wide net, including the shopping center conference, trade expos, and other events that we wouldn't ordinarily attend as staff.
Questions on that?
What is our current occupancy rate for the businesses within our city? Do we have a big vacancy?
Currently, I believe our vacancy rate, I don't have it right in front of me, but it's it's a low number. It's a single-digit number. But what we're finding is that there's a need to look forward and potentially identify opportunities to reposition some of our existing retail centers, possibly on El Toro Road, for example, in Foothill Ranch. And so these marketing efforts would help us identify partners to do that.
Now, the alternative to this would be, instead of making it new money, if you're interested in this, you could ask us to identify savings that could offset this.
I'd like to make that motion.
And I'll second. I will second that motion.
There you go.
And can you explain exactly what that would mean? I mean, I think the immediate response you got from that shows that that's our expectation all the time, that we look for savings. So, I don't think that it should be unique to this one issue. So maybe you can go into a little bit more detail on what your thought process is.
Sure. For these projects, we wanted to we wanted to include them in this table because they are new. They're new efforts. And so we don't want to always assume that you're going to be in favor of these new efforts. Now, some of them were rather small, but we still felt it was important enough to bring it to your attention. But for the smaller ones, especially when they're ongoing operations, we can simply look at our existing program and give you a new work plan and suggest how we could incorporate these. But others of these that have large ongoing costs, we wouldn't be able to make up. It would have to be new money.
Okay. Again, just based on the response that you saw, I mean, one thing that I would like to see, I guess, and maybe this would be the meeting that we do it, maybe it would be a different one, would be what are those things that you think might not be as effective that might need to be cut? So if you can find cost savings for this $8,000 a year, whatever it was, $8,000 a year, then I'm thinking that you have an idea of a list of things that potentially dollars could be reprioritized. And I'd love to see that at some point in a meeting such as this, because I think that would make sense. I don't want you to assume that just because we're doing it that the council wants to keep doing it, because a lot of times we probably won't remember what that $8,000 a year expenditure was that was approved 5 years ago, because it's just not top of mind. It's very small. So in general, I'm supportive of this, and these first few items here, I think sometimes, even though we're not a for-profit organization, you have to spend money to make money. And this is one of those areas where I think the potential return on investment is there. I also feel like it is with the previous item that we just approved, and some of the other items that we'll discuss. So, there are times when I definitely don't have any problem spending money, because my expectation will be that the consultant that we hire, even if they just help us in placing a couple of businesses and a couple of vacant retail storefronts, we'll see a return just from sales tax generation, whereas we'd be getting nothing if those locations were empty. So,
all right. Well, we have a substitute motion on the floor in a second, which is to go into the savings and come back to us, and let's vote on that.
That motion carries unanimously.
Okay, number 3, freeway signage study. Do you want to very briefly tell us what that is?
Certainly. This was a continuation of an item that you had on your agenda a few months ago that was brought forward by then Mayor Voights to look at, could we do freeway signage to advertise some of our businesses that are located along the 5? So we had a conversation about it, and we decided to put it more as a strategic plan issue. And so what this study would do is hire someone to come in and give us the policy implications of going toward a freeway sign, and also give us some initial cost estimates of what it would take to build such a sign.
So since I actually was the one that argued about this and brought this forth, I was kind of looking at is the businesses themselves to promote this and actually come to us. But because of some of the ordinances we have with pole signage or off-the-ground signage, that would be limited in their ability to do that. So I suggested that maybe we look at corridors like the Freeway corridor, the 241 corridor, where we'd make it areas that we would have this. And so I don't really know what the study would tell us besides us changing the ordinance to make it more acceptable and able for the businesses themselves to come together and put their signs up.
Yeah, if I could just follow up on that. What's my idea, too, in some senses, if we did that, then the businesses could come to us and we could, select the motif that way rather than somebody coming to us separately and doing that.
But it's prohibited because of the rules of the city right now, and they're not allowed. So that's something that we would have to work out with the Planning Commission and staff to make it available to where we could do it in corridors.
Well, I think what you're talking about is off-site signage, and we had talked about the difficulties in that and the Pandora's box you open up when we start to entertain that. So.
But if you do it into the corridors, I think that's where the discussion comes in the Planning Commission, because in the corridors that it'd be adjacent to, like, let's use, for example, the 76 station or Chevron station and the McDonald's on the 5 freeway, on the on-ramp of the 5 in El Toro Road. Both of them would like to have a freeway sign up, and you're splitting hairs. You're saying that you can't put the Chevron station on if you do it in the McDonald's parking lot, or if you can't do the McDonald's one adjacent to the Chevron one, or with the Chevron one if it's in the Chevron parking lot. So it's just common sense that we'd have to work with those neighboring businesses that are adjacent to the freeway or adjacent to the 241 to actually bring in commerce or consumers from the freeways that we have access to go through our city. We have the 241 on our eastern border, and we got the 5 freeway on our western border. And the fact is, the amount of people that drive from Los Angeles to San Diego, if they need gas, I mean, I'd love them to pull in Lake Forest and get gas, or a McDonald's hamburger on El Toro Road in Lake Forest. But I think that they think that it would benefit their businesses, and I think that I want to help the businesses do what they feel that they need to do, and I think that those corridors that go through our cities is an avenue for customers for those businesses.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a problem a little bit with that. First off, Shell, McDonald's, everybody else already has their signs up. I really don't see the need to add in more signage along the freeway. I'm just don't see it. We're starting to look like New Jersey pretty soon, and we don't want to do that.
Yeah, I was thinking, and I agree with that. Is it a Beatles song? Signs everywhere, signs, do this, do that. Don't you read the sign? My feeling was if businesses wanted to do that, and why wouldn't we work with them and let them do that? What do we need a consultant to go out and say, go do it? So I'm fully in favor of what you're talking about, but I don't see why we need to spend $25,000 to get a consultant to do that.
I would agree with that, but I think that is something that I'd make a substitute motion that we take freeway signage and put that on the agenda for the Planning Commission.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Then bring that back to us after they discuss it, and maybe hear from some of the businesses down there. I think that I know that Councilman Cagley was worried about signs everywhere. We're not talking about signs. We're putting them in the corridors of the 5 freeway, the 241, which are the major arteries in Orange County to get to and from. And so anybody that would like to get, like if Home Depot wants to put a sign along the 241 that's bigger, and I'm just throwing out, or El Polo Loco is right there off of Lake Forest and the 241. Wouldn't they be allowed to put one up off the 241? I mean, it's not really cluttering our streets, it's putting it on the freeway.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
So I think we have 2 separate issues going on here, and if I understand the motion, it's to go to the Planning Commission to discuss potential a business or neighboring businesses coming together to ask for a sign, right? Is that correct? Understand that? Okay. So I think our ordinance does preclude that, so that makes sense to go to the Planning Commission. My understanding of this particular item is that this was born out of the potential of having a shared sign amongst a variety of businesses where there was no shared property.
Correct.
And the problem with that is the reason why it's necessary to have a study to understand in some ways just the legal issues involved. If you don't own the property and there is a sign, then if you're going to put your name on it, they have to legally, it's my understanding, you can correct me if I'm wrong, and I think Mal's kind of read up on this quite a bit, but that you have to allow for anyone to be able to provide a message there, right? So, because if you don't own the property and you're going to allow someone else to put a sign up there, then now everyone has to have the same opportunity. So if someone wants to pay twice the going rate and put something completely offensive up there, and the property owner was willing to say yes, then there might be nothing that the city can do about it in that case. Where we could tell a business or businesses that are adjoining on some property that's shared, you can only promote your own business, then they would have that ability, but they wouldn't be able to promote anything beyond that. So, that's where there's a distinction here, and the way I understand the motion is that we're separating that out, and it's just the property owners being able to put up a sign at their own business, or if they're adjoining, they can put up a sign together if they could find a way to work together on that.
That's the example I use, but I'll give you the example. We all drive the 5 freeway. Sand Canyon, the 5 freeway, has a water tower up with the multiple signs of the businesses that are within that plaza. Go down the 405 freeway, you got that big sign that's a illuminated sign that's on the 405, that's the kaleidoscope, or not the kaleidoscope, but the spectrum sign. That has multiple signs of different businesses, and they're all on the property, but they actually Irvine's had other businesses. They've had Mercedes-Benz, they've had BMW up there, and those aren't adjacent to it, but it's on the property. So I think that there are ways around that, but as Irvine has done with Sand Canyon, the water tower, we've all seen that. Used to be Travelland USA, or the kaleidoscope, which is off the La Paz, or Brown Valley in the 5, have multiple businesses on their signs, illuminated signs. And a few years ago, they were talking about being able to rent those out to other businesses. So that was shot down by the city council. But I think that it's worth our topic, and I'm willing to spend the money if you'd like. But I thought that maybe we bring it back and talk about what the other cities have done.
And I can't say that there's a specific example where you might not be 100% right, but in some of those examples, I'm confident that the businesses don't own their property. There's a property owner, and they're leasing space.
I would say that's probably at the El Foro, too. Home Depot doesn't own the land that Home Depot's on.
Well, and I don't know whether that's true or not, but if it is, then yes, the property owner now can do something with their property, which could have multiple tenants, right? But anyone who's not within their property, this is how I would understand. Please chime in but that's how I would see the issue. So what I'm trying to do is just make sure that whatever is going to the Planning Commission, it's very distinct, and that we're not asking them to do something that now is going to require the study anyway.
I think we look at what's been accepted in surrounding cities and neighboring in the region, and you look at the malls. The malls have the mall shopping center, but then at the entrance of the mall, there's the signs of the different shops that are in the mall, and that's obviously a property owner that's done that. But the fact is, if the Chevron station owns the gas station and owns the property that's on, wouldn't he be allowed to put up a sign with the neighboring McDonald's or the neighboring RB's up on the pole? That's a question I've seen it done in other cities, in other municipalities, and so I believe it's feasible.
I appreciate your concern, but wouldn't that just fall under the Planning Commission? Wouldn't the lawyers there do that?
The question is, it's really an off-site signage question, is what I'm hearing. And I know that Mal has spoken with you guys in a fair amount of detail about it, and I'm sure we could go to the Planning Commission and have them talk about signage and off-site signage and sort of pursue these theories. You are correct that if you open up your ordinance to allow off-site signage, you cannot control the content. So you could end up with something that the community finds offensive, and you would be very limited in what you're allowed to do. If you are talking about revising your signage ordinance to allow adjacent, adjoining property owners to co-locate on a sign, we could probably look at that and do something like that. If you're talking about, taking someone who's 3 miles off the freeway in the middle of town and letting them put it on, that would be an off-site signage issue, and that's where we would get into trouble.
And that was never intended in my first motion and bringing it up to the city. It was never my intention for that. It's just those shops, gas stations, or restaurants that are along our corridors. Thank you.
All right, well, let's vote on the substitute motion, which is to throw it to the Planning Commission.
That motion carries unanimously.
Okay, and we should, did we have a motion and a second on spending the $25,000 on the study, or did we not get to that point?
I don't believe you did, no.
All right, then I'm going to let that die unless two people want to revive it. Okay, moving right along, the tree replacement policy.
I'll move to $30,000 for that tree replacement, because I truly, if going to some of the informational meetings that we've had in the county about some of the pests that are actually adversely affecting our forest here in Lake Forest and the surrounding communities in Southern California in general, I think that we've got to continue to keep forest in Lake Forest, and I think that us having a replacement tree policy, as I think that me and the city manager Deborah and I think Tom, we drove El Toro Road and just saw the amount of dead tree and foliage that were along our creeks and along our roads. You see the effects of some of these pests and some of the drought that has caused our loss of our trees. And so I would like to make the motion that we keep forest in Lake Forest, and so that $30 replacement policy, I move that item and think it'd be good for the city.
I'd like a little bit further clarification on what exactly this means. Does this mean...
Yeah, I don't think it's not really a tree replacement policy, and it's not $30. It's $30,000. What it is an inventory.
Correct. It's an inventory, and it's a tracking system so that we would know what private trees are out there.
Right.
We would track them, and then that would give us a way to encourage those to replace them once they are removed.
So this is non-city trees?
It's non-city and cities trees, if I recall, because the fact is we've had to go through and actually cite or code enforcement's out writing letters to the homeowners association and property management companies about the trees that are dead that we're asking them to remove, correct?
Correct. We have an inventory of our publicly owned trees and where we track their health and their trimming and so forth. We don't necessarily track private trees. So when the shot hole borer beetle impacts started to be seen, it was basically based on us driving around town and seeing dead trees and then having code enforcement pursue it. So this would go a step further where you're tracking healthy trees and diseased trees in an effort to try to keep up the privately owned urban forest.
I can tell you at Lake One, they have an inventory of trees, and they're very active replacing it. So,
and so does Portola Hills too. We have the same, we inventory our trees as well, so we know which ones are dead and which ones are going.
So I think where that's likely to be, there's even a tree committee person over there telling me I'm right. Always good to know I didn't screw it up. So the issue more is the non-HOA. We could certainly, when we meet with the HOA people on March 20th, we could find out from them how many actually do. We know they do, so we can find that out. And that leaves the 30% of the city that isn't in HOAs, where this could be a problem. Can we defer this till we get more information, or we need to do this tonight?
Well, we are going to bring this plan back to you, so if you tell me you're deferring it, I'm not going to include the $30,000 when we come back. I'm going to leave it out. And so what we could do is, in your budget workshop in May, we could bring this back and you could make a determination at that point. We'd probably have more information at that point, because we would have had the HOA meeting.
I think that's a really good idea, and I also would like it to be focused on the non-HOA areas, because I'm pretty sure just about every single HOA in the city has some sort of tree inventory program, but it's those areas that don't have HOAs, I think, that we would find the most concern. So if with permission, to bring this back with an estimate of only that small section of the city.
And I'll second that, but I still think that the amount of letters that or the amount of trees we saw when we did our city inspection, the amount of trees that were out there that were dead in HOAs that actually had to be cited or lettered to the HOA to have those removed, I think that shows evidence that we want to keep track of where the trees are being lost and then if they're replacing them again. So I still think that it's a good cost, but I'm willing to wait till after our HOA meeting. Thank you.
Yeah, and it would be subject to, like, so we know 2 HOAs do, but if it turns out the others don't, then it's an important thing to do. I agree with you about keeping the forest. All right, we have a first and a second on...
Can you clarify the motion?
Mayor Pro Tem Basil moves to bring back the contract with the budget and focus only on non-HOA areas, non-HOA trees.
So keep it in the budget for now and bring it back to us.
To bring the initiative back
Yeah.
during your annual budget workshop in May.
So, my concern about the motion is that non-HOA areas that aren't public property are basically people's homes and businesses. And that's where I have a problem with this. I don't have an issue with residents trying to voluntarily provide their information. If there was a way to promote that through the leaflet or something like that, I think that would be great. Ways of marketing to residents that we should be replacing trees that get removed and things of that nature, maybe planting more where there's opportunities, but it's a tad bit invasive to me. And I know that it's not significantly invasive. I mean, we have animal control that goes around and knocks on doors to see if people have dogs and things like that. So a tree, a dog, a cat, it kind of exists to a certain extent, but it's a little too invasive for me. So I'm going to oppose the motion.
Yeah, and I think you're right in the sense that the parklands where there are forests are the HOAs. They have them. The non-HOA people don't have parklands where there are trees, so there really is no population there to talk about. There's either all the HOAs are doing it, in which case we don't have to do it, or they're not, in which case we have to do it. But
I'm sorry to interrupt, but further than that is, for example, with Portola Hills 2, we maintain all of our HOA trees, but we don't go and inventory private residents' homes and their trees and what they're doing. So ours is just for our 246 acres that we maintain, not inclusive of any private property.
So they're all different. Lake 1 will actually tell you what to do with the tree on your own property.
Oh, really?
And if you cut it down, they'll give you a fine and make you build one. So we'll get a lot of information from the HOAs of what everybody's doing. So what's the motion again? Well, he made a good point, so I just want to make sure we're a motion that we can vote on here.
So bring this item back to the budget discussions, which is after the HOA roundtable, to include only the small section that is non-HOA trees.
Okay, and Councilman Robinson is suggesting that that's not relevant because there really are no public outside
areas are already maintained by the city.
Yeah, I mean, the relevant part is that now it's individuals' homes or businesses. Those are the only things in those non-HOA, non-public lands. So
would the maker of the motion entertain a friendly, I hate those friendly modifications, wherein we scratch the end of the sentence and say bring it back after you've talked to the HOAs?
I think I can appreciate that friendly motion.
Yeah, we can agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Then the motion is as it is, except for the last item that Councilman Robinson objected to.
So for clarification, so basically what the motion is we're going to go and talk to the HOAs at the HOA meeting and then come back to...
Yeah, and if it turns out there's only 2 HOAs who do that, but the rest don't, then it's a worthwhile thing to pursue. If they all do, we won't pursue it, and we get that to the city manager. Okay, vote please.
That motion carries unanimously.
Okay, next on table 3 is Whispering Hills. Can I have a motion to approve it as stated?
I actually, the Whispering Hills projects have been talked about and debated and reheard with public input many times. So I move that we move the $50,000 to year 2 and allow at least the planning stage of that to go forward, the feasibility, and actually so they have a blueprint to where they can go out and start putting together a not-for-profit that can actually help them with the funding of that and manning of that park, that community garden.
To make a second, an additional to your motion, not only do we move it up into year 2, but we move the actual implementation from year 4 into year 3. That way we're moving the entire process up a full year, not just the feasibility study for year 2.
And that'd be a friendly amendment, because I think that we should, but the fact is, right now, they're looking at just keeping it alive, and so the fact that if we spend the $50,000 and allow the planning be set forth, they actually have something to work with that's material that they can go out to their supporters and say, look at what we have, and the city supporting us. And so that friendly amendment is accepted. And
yeah, bear in mind the reason Whispering Hills got put off is that, and we did several, how many? 3, 4. We did 4 meetings on it, and we could never come up with a single item. There was a soccer thing, there was a dog park, there was the community garden, there was the community education center, there was the passive park, and we went through that 4 times, and there is no consensus from the people as to which way to go forward. So if you want to have a 5th meeting to try to get a consensus, I think I have no problems doing that.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, if I could provide some clarity. So we did originally do 3 workshops, I believe early in 2015, and you're correct that they ended without a consensus. And because we didn't have a consensus, we didn't have a design to move forward with. Last year, as part of the neighborhood improvement series of workshops, we used that consultant. We scheduled 1 workshop just for Whispering Hills. We held the workshop at the sports park, and most of the people that showed up wanted a garden park. Now, there is some disagreement as to what that means. If you ask different people what garden park means, it's not really clear. There's disagreement. And this is a park where we've sort of gotten to where we are through an unconventional path. It hasn't been the normal straight path of hold the workshops, develop the consensus, approve the design, build the park. We've really had 1 workshop where people showed up last year, and those people predominantly were from the area above Whispering Hills, and they did predominantly want a garden park. So it's a little, we'd have to put some thought into how we move forward and what we design.
Yeah, that's basically what I was saying. I don't mind putting it forward and having another workshop in which we try to figure out what we're doing, but I'm not sure that there was a consensus. You're saying, well, go ahead with the design. I don't think there really was a consensus coming out of that. So, but if you want to have another workshop and see if we can get a consensus out of it, I have no problems pushing it up, pushing the whole thing up, personally. Okay.
I think something that will help is if we can, this may be the wrong time for this, but no better time than the present. If we can put some sort of cap on the dollar amount, because the bigger this figure is here, the more opportunity there is for lots and lots of ideas. And we all understand that there's some area that we need to cut. So if we put a cap on the budget here and cut this 5.45 million to something that we all find to be more reasonable, then it narrows the options. It gives everyone some very clear direction on what can be accomplished. A lot of ideas could be thrown in, but there's only so much that we're willing to spend. So, and I'll just throw out a number. I mean, for me, it's not more than like $1.5 million. And I don't know what that does to parking lots and grading and all those sorts of things, because I don't have much around it, but I want to give you some parameters, you know, and give you an idea of what I'm thinking, so that if it far exceeds that, then we start having to have some pretty serious conversations. So.
Well, maybe Scott could give us some idea of what's it cost to build a passive park there that had nothing except, grass and shade and et cetera.
A passive park is less expensive because you're talking.
No, I want to get a bottom. So if you tell me even a passive park costs $2 million, then $1.5 million makes no sense. But
it might be best if we come back with some numbers.
I'll make a motion
more
that
precise.
I think that we should have a bottom, like a 2.5 to make it, because I think the early planning of what the designers had said was 1.7.
Right.
So, but I'm willing to let you guys work on that and bring it back to our budget workshop, and that we move that number, the $50,000 and move forward with in year 2.
Well, I think the 50 is too much. Then what's a workshop cost?
Well, less than 50. And I think it depends if we're doing a series of workshops. It also depends, I'm not clear if you're asking us to design a passive park or if you're asking us
We're
to
not
design.
asking, we're asking you to put together a public meeting, or a
Public meeting.
Okay, publicly, well,
Mayor and Council, the $50,000 is intended to be your design budget.
No, but we don't know what we're designing.
Right, but part of that 50 could go into that work to figure
Oh,
out.
okay, so you're going to say
That's
it's the
what I'm
public workshop and the design?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
and that would give us a conceptual design so that we know what we're talking about, and then from that, there would still be a final design that's really the engineering and the numbers that goes with that, so we can actually build it.
Okay.
Right, so the 50 would be a preliminary design. And I wanted to also mention that if you do move up construction 1 year, you are adding an additional year of maintenance, so keep that in mind. So if you move it up 1 year, you're adding $40,000 to the cost.
But even that's a fluid number to where we could, if depending on our budget that year, we could put it to year 3.
Yeah, we can
instead of
put it
4.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Correct,
Okay.
correct. And depending on what you build, obviously, it's going to
Yeah.
influence the maintenance.
So I'm willing to move that forward, and if we have a downturn, we can move that back out. So, but I'd like to think that we have a light at the end of the tunnel.
So the 50,000 moves forward, and the $5 million goes to $2.5 million. Is that the idea?
No, they're actually the $2.5 million is going to be left open to it. They come back to us.
Okay.
That was my understanding.
Oh, don't you need something for tonight?
Yes.
So she needs.
Basically, what I'm trying to get at is if you have a workshop and there's a written plan here that says you have available $5,450,000, you're going to have a lot of ideas that I think are going to be more significant than what we are envisioning. So that's the reason for providing some sort of like ceiling to all of this, so that we can.
I'm willing to make sure I'll leave it on the table at 2.5 then.
Yeah, not to exceed.
So, Mayor and Council, what I'm hearing you say is you'd like $50,000 in year 2, and then in year 3, you'd like $2.5 million for construction. So our effort is to design a $2.5 million park.
Have a public meeting and then move forward with
Correct.
the design.
And so we will plug in a maintenance number there as well when we bring it back to you.
That'd be great.
Sounds great.
I don't know if we're hearing word for word what the city manager's saying. So we have a $50,000 design budget, and what they're going to come back with is a $2.5 million park.
Not necessarily,
No,
but
that's-
more than $2.5 million.
No, but what she just said was that's what she would come back with.
Well, based upon preliminary estimates, parks, you guys were estimating it was 1.7.
That was based on one workshop, and that was very preliminary.
So I would imagine that a not to exceed $2.5 million, we should be all right. I mean,
I would expect so. I mean,
And if not, we'll bring it back.
if you hold to the vision that was expressed at the one meeting that we had last year, we typically don't design a park based on one meeting.
Okay.
We have a fantastic staff. They do a great job here. Okay, but when you, and no offense, I hope it doesn't come across that way, but when you give government employees a budget, they spend the budget, right? Because they're trying to provide the highest quality product that you want within reason. So if they're trying to make it look really good, then they're going to come in at $2.25 million and say, I just saved you 10%, right? And that still might be more than we felt comfortable spending. So that's what, and again, you all are fantastic, but I know what I would do in your shoes. Okay, you told me I can spend up to this. If I come back to you with a $1.5 million park, and you're like, wow, it wasn't nearly as good as I thought, and now you've sold yourself short because you had an extra $1 million that we gave you budget for. So, that's where I'm at right now. I mean,
What are you proposing?
Well, I mean, if maybe we just go with the 1.7. I know that the 1.7 was just a number that was thrown out. There's not a whole lot of data that came behind it. But again, if we say yes to all this stuff, we understand we're in the red walking out the door.
Yeah, no,
right? And so, and this is one of those significant expenditures. And I don't think that there are many people. There might be a few, but I don't think there are many people in the community that expect we're going to spend close to $5.5 million on this park. So, how many think we'd spend 2.5? Probably not that many. The 1.7, that's the number I would go with. It's 1.7. So I was at 1.5. I'll come up to 1.7.
Do I hear 1.8? All right. Well, you are the makers. You can either change it, or we can vote on that, and then if it doesn't succeed, then we'll go back and vote his 1.7.
I'll make a substitute motion. We know it 2 million. So the fact is, we have 5,400,000 on the table. So I think.
Yeah, right.
Okay, we just want to clarify. So within that 50,000 in that first year and 2 million in the second year, we're going to get a preliminary design and a public workshop.
No, second year and third year.
Okay, and then in the 2 million, we're going to get a final design and construction money for the park.
Right.
Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, if that motion passes.
Is that your motion?
But doesn't it means not to exceed 2 million?
Correct.
Not to do 2 million.
I just want to make sure you understand that final design will be coming out of that $2 million. Thank you.
Okay, and that's okay with the maker?
That is great.
Okay.
Great with me, great with you.
Everybody comfortable? They know what the motion is? Okay, let's vote.
That motion carries unanimously.
Yay for Whispering Hills.
Okay. So we now hit our 8 o'clock. That's our necessity break.
Make a motion that we. You want to make a break?
No, let's take a 5-minute break.
Mr. Mayor, this would be a great time to break so we can let you know where you are in terms of your one-time money and your ongoing money.
Or you're gonna get
when we come back from the break.
Keith's going to get the calculator out.
I already got it out. You're at 21,278,000.
20 million. And what? So how much?
So you've agreed on the 60,000 for the CCA study, 32,000 business marketing, which could come back. So we're if we find savings and let the city council know where we'd find savings in that budget and not go. So I've still deducted it, and then 2,130,000 is the total for Whispering Hills Park. That is 50,000 for a preliminary design. That is $2 million for both the final design and construction. And then, of course, I put 40 and 40 because we moved it up for maintenance, but that could come down depending on the size of the park and the acreage of the park and what's in the park. So right now, they're just all preliminary numbers.
Okay.
Other stuff, table 1, 2. So also, table 1.
No. These are 33 million.
Right. But you said that we're
council members, let's get back. We got a long way to go. We're not even halfway through table 3. And the next item on that list is the new golf course perimeter wall. And do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. This was based on a request from a resident, actually, who was, we've heard over the years from many residents that live near the golf course that there's frequently people who cut across. They cut a hole in the chain link fence and they cut across the golf course. And I just feel that the general sentiment among these residents is that they would feel more secure if there was a more secure barrier to get into the golf course, because then people wouldn't cut through their area to cut through the golf course to get to where they're going. And so this is a proposal to replace a portion of the chain link fence with a block wall. Now, we did approach the golf course with a cost-sharing model, and their response was, well, we might be interested in cost-sharing with you if you would cut our lease rate. And so we said, well, we're not really interested in that. So here we are.
Do you happen to have any pictures of what, so we can have it in perspective?
Okay, we can print some out and bring them down.
All right, let's move on to the next item, park security guards. Ooh, so we need park security, huh?
So this was something that was suggested at the last workshop by then Mayor Voights, and it was to add private security on evenings and weekends. And so we costed out a private security company at $10 to $15 an hour, arriving at an annual cost of about $163,000 a year.
So would that be not only isolated to the sports park, but it would make rounds to other parks?
That's correct. If you look at, the city has 30 parks. We would likely place them at the places that have the highest activity level.
Well, I guess I don't understand. Parks are closed on the evening, so what are we doing in the parks on the evening?
That's correct. They're closed in the evenings. This is actually not something that was brought by staff. I think this is something that came up. This is council initiated from your meeting in October.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to say, biggest issue we have in parks really has to do with dogs off leash. We don't get I don't see a lot of complaints about security or a lot of incidents involving security, but council might have different experiences.
I initially brought it up, if I may, Mayor.
Sure.
I initially brought it up because the fact that I think that our code enforcement, we brought it up as a code enforcement opportunity to bring another code enforcement officer on board that would work in the evenings and on the weekends, and maybe lighten the workload of our current code enforcement officers that are sometimes overly busy. So I thought that the weekend, a weekend code enforcement officer actually has some authority to where he could drive through our parks and kind of keep an eye on the parks and drive to see what other things are doing. As a code enforcement officer, he could also be eyes and ears for dogs off leash and other things like that. But he'd be a code enforcement officer more than a park security guard. Kind of was my thought.
Well, and again, what are dogs off leash in the evening?
I just brought it up as a topic, so I wasn't aware it was going to be on here tonight.
All right. Did you want to make a motion? Or?
No, I'd like to. Is that the hours involved with that? Is that one officer? Because you guys are obviously hiring a outside security company to do this. And so is that one officer? How many hours?
So this is actually the way that we costed this out, not knowing exactly what council was thinking, but we looked at 6 hours of service per day, 7 days a week. There's a range, there's an hourly range depending on the firm that you get and when you're asking them to work. It ranges from $15 to $25 an hour. We assume $25 an hour. It's $54,600 for one security guard to work 6 hours a day, 7 days a week. So the $163,000 that's three security guards. Just a little more background on this. If you're really talking about security, there are different models, I guess, different approaches to park security. This is the least expensive. One notch up would be a park ranger program, which is very expensive. It's where you develop your own park rangers. A step up from that, of course, would be additional deputies, which is even more expensive. So I think it really depends on what we're trying to address in the parks.
I see it as a potential for our sports park, which is really the gem of South Orange County, the gem of our city. But the fact is that after 10 p.m., there's nobody out there on the park. And so the fact is, this is someone that would provide some kind of security, drive through at the sports park and drive by our other parks in the evening. So I think there is ample for him to do. Give him another set of eyes and ears out there in the field.
It's certainly council discretion. At the sports park, the facility does close at 10 o'clock. That's when the lights shut off. That's the one park where we have a lot of cameras. We have license plate recognition cameras in addition to other cameras, but it's certainly council's discretion.
Or do we have a lot of crime at the sports park at night?
We've had incidents, most of which we've been able to give the sheriff's department workable information through the video camera system.
We actually, that's the park that actually had a mauling of a golden retriever by a big bull mastiff that was right there. Was that caught on video?
That was caught on video. The reason we weren't able to apprehend that individual is that they had paper plates on their car. It was a new car. So when they went through, the license plate reader couldn't pick up a license plate, and we weren't able to identify them.
Was there paper plate? Well,
but that was in the day.
It was. That's correct. It was during the day. But it was a new vehicle that didn't have license plates.
Chief, do you have? Is there a lot of crime going on in the parks at night?
Mayor and members of the council, there are at different times of the year, depending on the season, whether the park closes at dusk or at 10, in some parks throughout the city, there's still activity occurring in those parks, depending on the location. And police services can't be in all those parks all the time. An example would be Vintage Park. You get people in the summertime that like to go into the back of the area of that park and hang out and drink, and we get residents that would call us to go out there and clear them out. Depending on the priority of calls, it takes us a while to get there to do that. Whereas a security guard might be able to be there sooner. They want to be dispatched by the sheriff's department, but they would be doing proactive patrols to clear those out potentially before residents even call. It's just a lower level of authority to keep an eye on the parks and keep them safe. There are some parks where we have no activity at night. And there's other parks that, even though it's closed, there's no gated access to prevent access, and people are always out there in the parks.
Mountain View would be good.
Mountain View is a very high-profile park in the evenings, even though it's closed.
Okay.
So if I can, one more thing, I apologize. So whether it's not necessarily crime that's occurring, it's nuisance activities that are occurring that are bothering residents.
And would it not be true that an officer that gets called to a park for a nuisance opportunity would be a crime that's a opportunity for another officer to be called out to another call? That would be a higher. I mean, we're taking a patrol officer to go out to a nuisance to tell someone the park's closed.
Mayor and members of the council, that's correct. If a security guard is at a park and able to clear that park out, and that has the potential to reduce a call for service to the sheriff's department and leave that deputy in service to handle more important items. At the same time, the security guard could be in a park and people are refusing to leave, at which point the security company would call a sheriff's dispatch to have a deputy come out. So it could go either way, but that's what's going on.
Any more? Well, do you want to make a motion?
That's 3 officers.
That's correct. That would be 3 officers, 6 hours a day, about 7 days a week. And it doesn't mean they'd spend 6 hours in one place. We would distribute those where it makes sense.
Another question. Do we have any quantifiable way of saying, okay, well, we know they actually did surveil all the parks, or are they falling asleep on,
That's a great question. So there was one city that we checked in with. They've done this model where they've used security guards. It was the city of Pomona. And their experience was not really great. Now, part of that may be attributable to the scope of work that they had for the security guards, but they did have issues with people not showing up, and the difficulty, if it's a late at night shift, being able to verify that they're where they say they are and that they're doing what they say they're doing, what we're paying them to do. So I think those would be challenges.
On that same subject, our street sweepers have monitoring to where we can track where the street sweepers are. Do they not have that for security patrol cars?
I suspect they do. I think the question that I can't answer is, if you dispatch a security guard, you may be able to track the vehicle, but do we know that they're getting out of their vehicle and they're making the rounds and they're having a presence to be a deterrence? That might be harder to track.
Okay, did you want to make a motion?
I'll make the motion that we accept it.
Does anybody want to second that? Okay. Next item. Well, are you ready for the golf? Oh, we're getting pictures. Okay. Assistant city manager's got a big grin on his face. He says, "Ooh, we just lost, just saved $500,000." Okay. And the people who live in the condos across the street are complaining that people who cut through this park go through their neighborhood. Is that the idea?
Yeah, Mayor and members of the council, yes, we've had residents from the nearby homes complaining about every day, essentially, folks cutting through the golf course property to get to Los Alisos Boulevard. So they cut through the fence. There are holes that are being repaired as frequently as every week by the golf course staff to address the issue.
And the golf course staff are paying the bills for this, but they don't want to help build a wall.
They are paying the bills for the repairs of the fence, yes.
I know you mentioned a concrete wall. Has there been considered, like a wrought iron? That way there's still visibility, because putting a block wall, it impairs visibility, and there could end up with other problems with that.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. There have been a variety of different walls proposed, but I think that we want to have some visibility to the golf course and back to the home so that we're not obstructing views and just having a big wall up there.
Mm-hmm.
And there are a variety of construction types, including a wrought kind of iron fence design that would accommodate that need.
Maybe with a paint that can't be graffitied over, that kind of thing.
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, we did. Yeah.
So this is the same amount? Okay, so it's 10%.
It's a rough estimate at this point, but the walls that we looked at and the types of fences we looked at were approximately in that range. Yes.
If the people who are going down their neighborhood, Cherry? They're going down Cherry, and they're going to Los Alisos, and you're saying they're cutting through the park that way, but aren't they going to go through their neighborhood anyway? And if we had a wall, they'll just make a left-hand turn and go down Los Alisos anyway. Why would the wall there stop them from going to Los Alisos?
The most common cut-through path appears to be through the villas, through the condo complex. So they're going into the condo complex, cutting through the fence, and then going through the golf course to Los Alisos.
Why wouldn't they do that now? Only instead of continuing through the golf course, they're just going to go down Geronimo and then make a right on Los Alisos.
I'm not sure I understand the question. I mean, right now, the most expedient way to get through is just by going through the fence and cutting through the golf course property.
I know, but putting a wall in front of the fence doesn't stop those people from coming. It just means now, when they get to that point, they've got to turn left and right instead of going through. Why is a wall going to stop people from going from wherever they're going from to Los Alisos? How is a wall going to make a difference?
Yeah, it would prevent folks from cutting into the golf course. if that makes sense. So they're using the golf course as a cut-through, and if there's a fence in the way and they can't climb over it and they can't cut through it, then they have to go all the way around as they should to get to Los Alisos.
Right.
So they're trespassing right now.
But they're still going through the place in Cherry regardless. How does that, so you led me to believe we have a problem that neighbors are upset that people are going through their place. They're coming from here somewhere, they're going here, and they're going through their place and going this way. How is putting a wall here going to stop the people who are going here from going through their place anyway?
The complaint is really the cut-through through the golf course. The residents are complaining about that.
Why do they care who goes through the golf course?
They think it's attracting people to trespass through the villas as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know, is it me? It's people here who want to go here, right? And there's a golf course here. And they're coming here, and they're going there, and they go this way. But they're going that way anyway. So they're going to come here, they can't go through there, and now they're going to go that way. It didn't solve the problem for the people here. The people here are still going through there to get over there. I don't see how we're solving a problem here.
Yeah, we're just making the golf course more secure.
The complaint is also, the golf course is experiencing some trespassing issues, some vandalism. Things are happening also on the golf course property that disrupt their operations because of this activity. So it's a very long perimeter fence. I think it's something like 650 linear feet, and it would be designed to make sure that people have to go all the way around and that there's no available cut-through from the villas.
Well, I know, and I'd be virtually more sympathetic to the golf course if they were coming to the party.
Well, and the golf court wasn't the one that brought this to us. It was the residents.
Right.
So the golf course wasn't asking for this.
This is the area that is in question. I think that's the area. The area in question is just bordering the back side of those condos. So that it would be right here.
Yeah, but they're still going to come down this way.
They come down this way, they're now on public streets and visibility, and they're less likely to vandalize if they're stuck walking the perimeter of the property, not crossing through it.
I know, I see it as a big problem for the golf course.
Right.
And they don't want to pay for it, so.
Can we go back and try to renegotiate with them? And, if they're having property crimes and vandalism, maybe if they're looking at that and how much money it's costing them.
Yeah, certainly we could go talk to them again.
It's already been stated that they're doing the repairs of the chain link fence. I mean, there's an annual cost that they're putting into this already. So if we make this permanent, that we're not going to be cut with bolt cutters anymore, that maybe they'd be more feasible with that. But I think they should have a stake in this too.
All right, well, it's nothing till the third year, so we're not interfering with the budget by asking you to go renegotiate. Do you want that as a motion?
Yes.
I'll make a motion that we renegotiate with the golf course.
Second.
Well, in saying renegotiate, you mean approach them about the wall, not renegotiate the lease. Or
No,
anything.
Correct.
Approach them with the
Thank
cost. Okay.
Cost sharing
Second that.
for,
Yes.
So I'm not supportive of the wall in general. I think there are very few people that are trying to break into the golf course to get some free holes, because I'm not really sure it's worth free. I think that one of the issues here is that the golf course is struggling financially, so they just view this as an opener. It's a contract opener. You want to start discussing? Yeah, okay. Well, we want to discuss, reducing our lease. So I kind of view it as futile. I don't even want to waste your time doing it. I just think that we shouldn't be building the wall. So.
all right, if the motion doesn't pass, then I'm assuming you'll make a motion not to go ahead at all.
Yeah, I'll just probably let it die, and we can move on to the next item.
I'll withdraw my second then.
So we just let it die. Okay. CERT program, Item 11. Do you want to explain to people what the CERT is?
Yes, Honorable Mayor and City Council. The staff here at the City of Lake Forest, we currently offer a Community Citizens Emergency Preparedness Academy, or CEPA, once a year. It's very similar to the Community Emergency Response Team program. Both are involved with providing emergency preparedness training to residents. However, the Community Emergency Response Team, or CERT, is a little more of a formal program that you see countywide. Most cities in Orange County provide this over CEPA. And one of the biggest differences between it is that there is continuous use of those that go through the CERT Academy that will be used in emergencies here in the city of Lake Forest. And also, there's additional trainings that can be offered if someone wants to further their education in disaster relief on the CERT team.
I'll move this CERT program forward. I think it's well use of our money to get more citizens active.
I'll second.
In case of emergency.
Any discussion? Vote.
That motion carries unanimously.
Number 12, the no-kill animal shelter feasibility study, for which I've already offered to do it at half that price,
No.
a third of the price. Any comments? That price seems too high to me, but you say that's based, your price is based on what?
So that number is based on some preliminary proposals that we looked at last year and costs that other cities incurred doing similar studies. So it's a ballpark number. We're certainly hoping that those costs would come in lower, but this would provide us with enough funding to do a full study.
I'll second it.
I don't think anybody moved it.
Oh, I thought you moved it.
No, I don't know. I'm trying to get a little money here.
Well, all that they're going to do is do RFPs, and then when it comes back here, then we can kind of parcel out what exactly we're asking for, and I'm sure we can bring the price down at that point. But at least this is a placeholder.
Okay, I'll second her motion. Discussion. This is going to be enacted. We gave you several things to do.
Right. So our plan would be to come back with a scope of work that we would let you all comment on, and then we would issue an RFP and come back with a recommended contract award and budget appropriation at that time. So that's when you would actually commit your funding.
So we have enough time to see whether or not it should be Ajo, Irvine, Costa Mesa, all those options.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's vote, please. Question?
I'll make sure I understand. You said we're not committing funding, we're just voting to approve this amount?
Yes, you're voting to put this amount in our projections. You don't actually commit to spend the money until you have a contract before you and so forth. So this is for our financial plan.
And we approved a couple of weeks ago a whole series of possibilities to explore before going to this possibility. Okay, vote please.
That motion carries with Councilmember Voigt abstained.
Okay, the marketing news videos. That's kind of self-explanatory, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm here to answer any questions if you have any about that.
Does anyone have questions on that?
Well, are we duplicating efforts? Because if we're doing a marketing for Lake Forest, we're doing the business marketing plan above, and so I think that the outreach to businesses, it brings us back more possibility of return than a marketing news video. So.
Yeah, the difference with this one, Mayor and City Council, is that this was supposed to be kind of more news of what's going on in the city, not necessarily geared towards the business sector. It was more, this is what's going on in the city. We had talked about doing more regular video production from staff on different events going on, and potentially the cost for the equipment to do this. And if we ever did want to pay for someone to be the face that runs those videos as a professional, that would be these costs as well.
So, but we actually have our leaflet that does that, and we have our Facebook pages that do this also. So I think it's duplicating of services right now. I think that, if you look at Bunny Blast, the popularity of Bunny Blast, or the popularity of our Dino Days, which is actually out performed, and our wildest dreams, the amount of people that come from outside of Lake Forest to come to our dyno days at the Dino Park. I think that we're already getting plenty of marketing out there, so it's just increasing attendance at Snowfest, which is already at capacity. Our holiday, was it at Heritage Hill, the glow light, or kids from all of South Orange County come to Heritage Hill, so I think that we're getting plenty of marketing out there. I don't think we have the ability to take much more in. So I think that it's just duplication of money, so I think I'd rather spend the money at marketing and see we're pushing through all these items, and I don't know what the total cost is. If we approve everything on here, what's our total cost?
Okay, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this was mostly equipment, which could be used for anything, really.
But we have equipment with Facebook now. We're doing Facebook Live right now, this equipment.
Correct. The equipment actually that we're using right now is our staff's equipment. It's his personal equipment, so it would be something that the city would own.
Do we lease it from him, or?
We do not. We're getting a good deal right now.
Well, I think, considering kind of the direction where everything seems to be going, it's, there's a lot more internet, a lot more interaction that way. I don't see it as, and it's a nominal amount of money. We're not talking, $150,000, $200,000. I think it's a nominal amount of money, and I think at this point, I think it's worth the investment, because it would be to market just about anything. It's not necessarily some of the programs like Bunny Blast, things like that, but we can expand it, and there are categories we probably haven't even envisioned yet where we can go with this. So I have no problem with it, especially being at such a nominal amount. So that would be my motion. Then do we go ahead and approve it?
Okay, I'll second the discussion. Let's vote.
That motion carries with Councilmember Voigt's abstained.
Okay, the senior volunteer program really has no impact in the next 2 years, so I'm going to pass that and go to number 16, the Lake Forest dashboard, $20,000. I believe this was Councilman Robinson and I, particularly Council Robinson, talking about this. My experience has been looking at keyboards, dashboards, that generally speaking, most people provide them free, and then there's a licensing, and then you're renting it for whatever it is. Or you can buy the software, and then you're using it without the license. And here you're kind of giving us the worst of both possible worlds. You're making us buy it and lease it, and make a lease payment. Have I misread that area?
Well, this would be just comparing what some cities have done, where they've worked with a company to develop their own more customized software application, and then having ongoing software cost. If you wanted a more kind of off-the-shelf, lower-cost product, we can certainly look into that. But our thinking was that you would want a more customized system for Lake Forest.
Yeah, those off-the-shelves can be customized, but there's a difference between customizing off-the-shelf and customizing. So, yeah, that would be accurate, doing it your way.
I think I'd like to get a better idea of what off-the-shelf would actually look like. If it can accomplish what we're intending, then off-the-shelf for a fraction of the cost sounds good to me. So I think this probably would require a little bit more investigation to see what the offerings are for a standard boilerplate dashboard. I don't know if anyone else feels the same.
I think Councilman Robinson and I were particularly interested in that. Did you have are you familiar with some of the dashboard, the software, and do you think that we could customize off the shelf, or do we have to actually go out with a software developer?
Well, for what I'm anticipating, I think that something off the shelf would work. Right now, what I'm really hoping for is just getting more data on a regular basis, and something where we can see what is improving and what's regressing in areas of the city. So, I think that that's what we're all focused on. The most important part are what's the data and what are the metrics that we're trying to capture. The actual software itself, I'm kind of less concerned about at this point, and just what information do we want to see, and do we have that data readily available right now. Once we have that, I think off the shelf with a little tweaking to our needs is more than sufficient for me. I'm not looking for something significant because, I'm not, you all might want something like that because you're looking at this on a day-to-day basis, but this is something that I would expect we're looking at once a month or maybe, every other week in the city manager's weekly update. It's not, a daily tracking. A lot of these metrics aren't going to be changing on a daily basis, but that underlying data that gives us the key metric that we're looking at, maybe we'll call it 20 of them, right? There might be 20 data points that make the one data point that we're going to look at, and you may want that. So, I really think that, you should probably come back to us and let us know what you think you need to give us that higher level look at the health of the organization. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, and I think also we need to give them some indication of what we're looking for to get as well, and how detailed we are, how detailed we want, and then that would, once we have that scope of work, that'll be a lot easier to know if it's customized or not, how many users it is.
Well, that would be the metrics that Dwight referred to, wouldn't it? That tells us what we want. We establish a metric we're looking for. What data we want, what's the underlying data, what we want to get to.
Right.
Would be the metrics. That'd be the answer you're looking for, I would think, Mayor.
Yeah.
And the city manager and I have had at least one somewhat detailed conversation about this and kind of talked about it at a surface level a few times. But, I think eventually we need to come to some consensus on what are the things we all want to see. And there might be particular items that only one member wants to see, but it's very, very high priority for them. And, I have no problem with that being one of the metrics that we take a look at.
Yeah, and I'm not interested in reinventing any wheels. If there are other cities that are doing similar things, and we can kind of dovetail on what they're doing, that maybe will help to guide us with what we're actually looking for, because there may be things that we hadn't considered that other cities are doing that might benefit us. And it could all still be boilerplate program, so.
What do we do with the figures then?
I'd like to keep the figures for now, and then as we move forward, we can refine those.
Spoken like a government worker.
Yeah, no. Yeah. I want to cut the figures, the 20,000, I want to cut it to 3.
Spoken like a private
Make it
citizen.
a little 3. Because, again, I've done some work, not a lot of work, but off the shelf, mostly they just give it to you for free, and then it's simply the leasing costs. So I'll make a motion to cut it to 3.
Mayor and members of the council, I really would like to have more than 3. I think that really boxes us in quite a bit.
What do you want?
20.
I'll give you 10.
Second.
Okay.
What are we seconding? 10?
10. All right. Any comments?
Well, I think with the discussion we're having, it probably makes the most sense for the city manager to come back to us, hopefully not in an agenda item, because I think that would be ridiculous, but maybe with some data that you're getting on what we could expect to see at a $10,000 level and a $20,000 level, and then we could make that determination with the budget in June. Is that fair enough?
Yeah, I'll leave it at 20 with the understanding that less
this could be
is better.
something we bring back in May at the budget workshop.
And the maker of the second will take
and
as
just
friendly amendment.
if we can see what those two are, like what we would get at 10 and what we would get at 20, and again, we might have everything that we are looking for in the 10 or less, but to get the underlying data, into the program well enough where you can provide us that, you need a little bit more. That might be the case. So, I think that gives a good range.
Okay, we vote on that? Item number 18.
I'm sorry, Mayor, I'm not sure we had a second on that.
Yeah,
I'll second.
Councilman Voigt seconded.
Thank you.
I did accept the friendly amendment.
That motion carries unanimously.
Item 18, fee recovery. This came up at a council meeting not so long ago.
Fee recovery policy and study. It's on the second page. Fee recovery and policy.
Okay. Do you want to briefly tell us what that is?
I believe we're on the document management system, which is a software purchase in year 3.
No, we're on fee recovery.
Well, we just talked about the Lake Forest dashboard, so the next one down
Oh,
is the
I'm
document
sorry, yeah,
management
document.
system.
You're right.
Yes, and so this would replace our existing software that we use for our records archiving, as well as we provide a portal for the public to do public records queries. It's pretty limited, and so this is a proposal to replace that system. This is really up to the council as to whether you want to do this within this 5-year time frame or if you'd like to wait.
Is the system that we're using now working?
Yes, it is working.
I support this decision because I know firsthand from other municipalities that take a lot of records requests, and it costs a lot of man-hours to do. And by the end of the cost of this $100,000, I mean, that actually there's one agency I know of for sure that spends 3 times that in public records requests. So if we can offset some of those staff costs by having a better, more accessible system, then I support that.
That's your motion?
Yes.
We have a second? No second? I'll second it just for purposes of discussion.
So, as part of the discussion, what would be anticipated cost savings, from man-hours if we were to move forward? And I totally understand. I can guess the agency, and I can guess that it's one individual that's probably more than half
Right.
that cost.
Right.
So-
It would be difficult to project that other than to say there are a lot of agencies that are getting continual records requests from multiple people. It's not just from one person.
Sure.
So the potential savings would be you're not going to add another records specialist, most likely. I don't see us probably eliminating from that. But you would also be giving the public better access to the records that are there. Because we have we've been faithfully converting our paper documents to electronic documents, but as a resident from home, it's really hard to search our system. And so our goal is to find a program that will let people do that search. Now, to the extent it saves our processing, I can't really project that. But I know that if we were to invest in a new system, we would most likely improve the performance that we have now.
Are we getting a lot of requests from people who are accessing from home and saying it's really difficult to, how would we quantify that? Because we can
Right.
put a $100,000 dollar amount to it, but.
Right. This was really our former city clerk's, initiative, and so I don't know that information. I could get back to you with more, unless Jennifer can speak to it. No.
And do we have a deficiency now, or?
We have a limitation on the public's ability to do real research into our records. And so most likely, if you're going beyond things that you can get through the SIRE portal, it's really limited as to what you can get. So you're having to call us, and we're going to help get those records for you, or we're guiding you through it when you come to our lobby to look, use our computer, but access our records.
And to Councilman Robinson's point, what is that costing us, $5,000 a year? $10,000 a year?
Right,
What's that
and I
costing
don't
us?
have a record for that. So another way to look at this is it is a large legacy system, and we tend to, those tend to reach their lives in about 7 to 8 years. We're probably looking at that time frame now, but can I say it's breaking? No. We can make do with it. So if this is something the council wants to look at, perhaps as a year 5 project, you could certainly do that as well.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, if I could get a point of information, Mr. Neves, where are we at with total on this? Where are we at with our budget? Would you please ring us up and see where we're at a subtotal?
Well, if we
before we
move it-
check out. I just want to be shocked at
Oh.
the end when we check out.
If we move it to
Where
year
are we at?
3 or year 5, it makes no difference on the
You're down to $21,200,000.
No, we were at 21 million.
21,278.
We were at that. 21,
Yeah.
270.
Now
We've
you
added
you
more.
reduced it by another 50, 60, 70, $80,000. 21,200. 21,190.
So this would be a one-time cost. You're already paying maintenance fees on the software you have now, and so those would continue, so it wouldn't be new money. So you're really talking about the estimated $100,000 as a one-time cost.
So can we move that from year 2 to year 3 or 4?
Oh, it's in year 3 now.
Yeah, right now it's in year 3. We could certainly move it into year 5.
I'd make that motion that we move that to year 5.
Okay, that won't change anything. Is your second? Okay, vote, please.
That motion carries unanimously.
Okay, now the fee recovery policy and study. And could we have a brief discussion of what that is?
Mayor, members of the council, the fee recovery is a comprehensive citywide cost or a fee cost recovery. All fees in the entire city, including the tough part about this is we're going to try to do this before the opening of the Civic Center, and those will need to be projected costs. So that is the expertise we need to help us with the setting fees and programs for the opening of the Civic Center for both the Community Center and the Performing Arts Theater. Now, this cost might be a little high. We don't know. I've done a comprehensive fee study when I was in Tustin years ago, and that was a citywide comprehensive fee study, and that was almost $60,000. And that did include a whole host of new facilities like we have here. The last time the city did a comprehensive fee study was probably 10 or 12 years ago. And we just seem to be just doing one-offs here or there. And that's not really a good way to keep increasing your fees. Plus, part of this study, depending on what the council gives direction as, is do you want to look at the sports park as more of a revenue generator? We could put that in this whole study and other sorts of things like that.
Oh, great. I'll make a motion we move forward with that.
Second.
Any discussion?
Sold.
You know, I know. All right, vote, please.
Just real quick, what specifically are we looking at? I understand the definition of comprehensive, but so this is every department, every kind of fee? I mean, does this include
Every single department. We go
services
through
and-
community services, development services, public works, city clerk,
Okay.
every fee in the city. And we'll do it all at one time, comprehensive, go through the city, set salary ranges, set everything to the current amount. Because we have a lot of fees currently that are based off of salaries from 2007, 2008, when we did the last fee study. And without bringing those back to you, we can't increase them. So this would be when I mean comprehensive, I mean everything, including the new Civic Center complex.
Okay, because I know that with programming, that we've been very apprehensive at raising fees because it's basically residents enjoying certain amenities that the city offers, enjoying their parks, dino days, things like that, you know, and we've been, I think we went through it with the sports park and whether we were going to charge for cards for gym use and, you know, things like that. Had a long discussion about that. I know the Park and Recs Commission did too. And if that ends up being a significant portion of it, I think we'd probably be spinning our wheels. So hearing that all the departments, I mean, I'm much more on board, and I think that needs to be where the focus is, where there's clearly some cost recovery on development services, as an example. And you know, when developers are having to pay a fee, or someone's having to pay a fee for a permit of any sort, even a remodel or something like that, making sure that there's cost recovery involved, I think is incredibly important. But some of the other programming, I mean,
Yeah.
you mentioned kind of some of the civic center stuff, and I can appreciate,
And
you know,
this, you know, during this process, you could also set your policies on how much you want to charge residents, non-residents, and you know, if you only want them to have 20%, you know, cost recovery or 18%, 15%.
Yeah.
That's the time to also, why we bring this back, is set those types of policies.
Yeah, because when someone uses the community center for a wedding, clearly there's going to be a cost, and there's be a cost anywhere. But okay, what is that cost? I think there's going to be a fair amount of discussion there about what is their benefit as a tax-paying resident of Lake Forest versus exclusive use of a facility for a set period of time. And we have that, whether it's exclusive use for gyms or sports fields or all those sorts of things, and then there's just the enjoying a public amenity.
Yeah, the residents enjoy the public
right?
amenity.
And so
Yes.
I think that's more where our discussion's been, where should you pay some fee just to use the basketball gym, or should you have to pay a fee to exclusively use the basketball gym? Those are two distinct issues for me.
Yes,
And kind of where some of my philosophical
Yes.
apprehension's been. So.
Okay.
Okay, vote.
So just for clarification, we didn't need to, that wasn't a substitute motion, that was just added onto it because we're just going for the fee study, so thank you.
Right.
Call that vote.
The Mayor Pro Tem said she voted before she left. Oh, she's back.
And with goodies.
Oh, thank you.
It's either Leah or Tom.
Please cast your votes.
Vote. That motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Okay, number 19, strategic partnerships. Someone explain what that is?
Okay, strategic partnerships. This is the effort to establish more public-private partnerships to the extent that we can use those to expand the use of our facilities, new programs, capture cost savings, and so forth. And so this would be a new workload, so we're identifying a part-time analyst to bring on board that would be assigned to pursue forming strategic partnerships.
And how much are we going to get back from that person?
To be determined, depending on what it's a rainmaker position, basically. So I couldn't give you, specifics at this point.
Any questions?
I kind of think that, as we grow as a city and as we get our feet on the ground with our new civic center and that, I think we look for opportunities for private partnerships. But to hire someone to analyze that, I think that they come organically as needs rise. The Boys and Girls Club is a perfect example.
Can you give me an example of types of things that you think this person might be doing? I mean, if you have a model from another city where you've got the idea, can you give me an idea?
I don't have a model from another city. This was suggested by Councilmember Robinson as something that we wanted to see more public-private partnerships.
One of the most successful private partnerships was the Etney Skate Park, which came organically. Boys and Girls Club came organically as a need, and as a organization came forward with a necessity and a request that we partner with them. So I think that something like this, to spend $45,000 a year at the total of nearly $200,000 is just, I think it will come across naturally if we just...
Yeah, I can think of an example. The Mayor Pro Tem asked for an example. So the guy who owns Lone Depot is interested in Veterans Affairs, and so we're doing a Veterans Park. So maybe we could approach them for sponsoring some of the costs of the
I
veteran.
did try. I called him several
did you?
times.
Okay.
Yeah, he never called me back.
Okay, well, it's okay. A bad example of strategic partnerships. Yeah, I tend to agree that it should be organic, and on the other hand, here's a perfect example where it's not working. So I could go either way on it myself. Any other suggestions?
Let me just explain where I was coming from initially, and I hadn't envisioned a person or a budget amount. It's just more of a concept. But we've talked a little bit tonight about some of the success of our community services programs. We have Dino Days that we've expanded to 2 days, and it has just a significant number of participants. And I feel like a lot of families in town are starved, they're craved for entertainment options for their children on weekends. So we could choose to do more events. I assume that at the vast majority of our events we lose money. Is that fair to say? I mean, we have some fee there, but we're not making money for sure. And so what I was playing around with, the thought that I was playing around with that I've talked to the city manager about, was having private companies that could come in to, for instance, the nature park and run something like Dino Days, right? So it's a public-private partnership where there's a private organization that comes in using a public facility. They have to pay a lease, right? And they just use it for 1 day, 1 weekend. They're providing entertainment for residents. It's up to them whether they can turn a profit or not. And now there's another event in town that we haven't had to put on, but people get to benefit from. Those could be done in a variety of different ways. They could be done on private property as well. Parks work for some. In others, it's parking lots. So, as an example, a circus recently just came down at Westminster Mall. I've seen it, for the last couple of weeks. Cirque du Soleil has used City of Irvine property. So has the horse one that I think Councilmember Voights has been to. So these are public-private partnerships that could be developed using potentially some public land or a public facility for a private use that benefits the community. And again, I hadn't envisioned a person or a budget, but just kind of thinking along those lines where, how can we develop some of those strategic partnerships? And, it's not something that we currently focus on. One thing that we've talked about to a certain extent has been with economic development that in some ways that department is focused on trying to help businesses traverse our little bureaucracy here. And so it's kind of concierge service almost. In other ways, it's trying to help with networking and seminars, but it really hasn't focused in this particular area. So, I would look at this and ask that same question and that same offer that you had earlier. Is there something that we could strategically move around, some cost savings in one area to allow for something like this to occur rather than some new money? But I'm open to comments from my colleagues.
I think that we just talked about, and I think it was emphasized by Councilman Robinson that we use our facilities at not a profit, but as a cost recovery. But you just invited private agencies to come in for profit or not for profit, but then yet we're spending as a city, a municipality, $45,000 a year, $46,000 a year. $46,000 that I think that we would be better off using by using it for another police officer or another security guard on out there patrolling the parks. I think it's just a lot of money for us to be going out looking for a strategic park, where I think that most of that kind of stuff comes organically. I think it comes organically because of the location we're at. And if they wanted to have a private partnership, the request is made by the private entity.
I concur with Councilman Voight's. The Boys and Girls Club is a perfect example. The Kiwanis, Chamber of Commerce, all these people, they want to do something in the city, they'll bring it to us. I don't think we need a position for it.
I think is really interesting. We're going to do a fee recovery and policy study, which I think may answer a lot of our questions. There may be, through that study, they may come up with ideas where we can, make some changes to the way that we hold our events and fees for such. So I think that maybe waiting on the strategic partnership costs, maybe we can find out what the fee recovery policy study comes up with, and then we can go from there.
Okay, and I have a fourth opinion, or another different opinion. I wouldn't mind trying this and seeing what it produced. If it produced, if we got Panasonic Presents Dino Days and that saved us $40,000, whatever our losses are on Dino Days, and they can do that 3 or 4 times, then suddenly the $45,000 isn't a lot of money. If they're just sitting around playing video poker for $45,000, we're losing money. So I wouldn't mind it as an experiment. So that's a different perspective altogether.
Yeah, and you know,
in all due respect, Mayor Gardner, that's a great idea. We have corporations in Lake Forest that possibly, we have the new Toshiba right across next door. But I think that $45,000 is that another staff person? What are we getting for that $45,000 that we could do right now as a staff or as council members?
Well, this is suggesting a part-time senior analyst. So I guess what the approach we took to this is it's a workload for somebody to pursue these partnerships. And so as an alternative, what we have talked about internally is we're working on the economic development staff's work plan right now. We could use a portion of that time to pursue these partnerships as just let's see what we can do with our existing resources. And then 2 years from now, when we're back at a strategic plan, we can relook at this as, do we need to hire, contract with someone to pursue these on our behalf? But it'll be a little more of a proof of concept. So it's not new money, but we would be replacing things that we have traditionally done in the past.
Okay, so we have business marketing, which over the next 5 years will be $32,000, which I think is a great thing to spend money to actually market City of Lake Forest as the logical choice for business. But then we're spending another $10,000 and making news videos on clips for Lake Forest to put on Facebook or put online. I think we're duplicating process, and then now we're adding $146,000. No, $183,000 for $183,000 for private partnerships. I think that it's kind of redundant of all that we're doing there. I mean, in the marketing of Lake Forest, I think that we could put in that we have, but we don't have really the open space to have a Cavalia or a Cirque du Soleil here in Lake Forest. Maybe up in Foothill Ranch, maybe we could have something out in the parking lot, but the fact is that it's limited to what we did. So I think that we're just spinning our wheels and continue to spend money and to hire a new analyst that do part-time work to look out for strategic partners. I think that, like I said, I think strategic partners come naturally.
All right, well, it looks like, do we have a motion on that? No.
Well, I really do like the idea and what you're trying to convey. It makes a lot of sense. So you're suggesting that we use our current resources to try to begin to procure some of the partnerships. So we can say no today to the cost of this, but with your extra work and with our feasibility study for our fee recovery, I think we're going to come up with something. So.
Right. So.
Yeah, I concur. So it's off the budget, but.
Right. So we'll see what we
idea.
can do as part of our economic development work plan, and then you'll have more information 2 years from now, and we'll see if you want to entertain this at that point.
Okay, next.
Just briefly, so I think that's a great concept. Again, I wasn't looking for a position or a budget amount, but staff is just saying this is where they thought that the time would need to be spent to make something like this a success. I think in doing this, we're going to have to look at what our ordinances allow, what we can do on public property right now, and so that would probably be the first step. And I run a business every day. If I just think that organically customers are going to come to me, I'm going to go out of business.
But
it happens.
Hire another employee.
It happens from time to time, but I've been a marketing consultant. I've run a business. I've had people tell me marketing is a waste of money. I've had people want to spend money on marketing when times are good, and then they don't want to spend any during a recessionary period when they need the business the most. And there's a lot of stuff that we're going over tonight. And again, as I mentioned earlier, sometimes you have to spend money to make money, and we're not a for-profit organization, but if you're not out there promoting yourself, you're fooling yourself to think that your competitors, and in our case, our competitors are Mission Viejo, Irvine, Laguna Hills, and sometimes even out to Inland Empire and so forth, that they wouldn't do that. The state of Texas spends millions of dollars a year in the state of California trying to lure businesses to the state of Texas. Those are marketing dollars, right? And so, I'm not suggesting that we go to, economic development war with any of our neighbors, but I'm saying we should really be looking at what our resources are, what our assets are, that we're the gateway to South Orange County, that we're the, the perfect place for business. I forget our slogan, but the natural choice for business, all those sorts of things, and, do something with it, looking at those opportunities. I'm not really sure whether it's public land or private land, but every time I drive by Moon Nursery along the 5 freeway in Irvine, and I'm guessing it's public property, just with where it's located, I'm like, wow. They took an area that didn't look so nice. They're probably generating at least some dollars from it, and it looks terrific, right? So what were some of the things that we could have done at Whispering Hills over all the years? Could Moon Nursery have come in there and put up a bunch of plants? And so I'm just saying,
it's getting late. So I'll second your motion to hire a new employee.
No, that's not what I'm doing.
Second your motion to make the $45,000 for a new employee. It's just that
I haven't made a motion, so you can't second one. But if you want to make one, go for it.
Yeah, no, I think we're letting it die with the understanding that we are interested in pursuing that, only not at a budgetary level at this point. Number 20, supporting local talent. Wasn't that a movie? No, your local sheriff. Yeah, that's right. I knew it.
Honorable Mayor and City Council, this was a concept that was brought forth by prior Mayor Scott Voigt last fall, and this was an idea that the city would provide programs that would support local talent for internships within the city. And this is actually an item that's going to be brought before the City Council at the next City Council meeting for further discussion, but essentially this would be a program, a City Council internship program, a Youth and Government Day, different options that we could provide to help support the youth in particular, but the local talent here in the City of Lake Forest.
And the money is to put on the fairs and to go to those things?
Correct.
Comments? Questions?
I think that with the rising costs of living in South Orange County and the fact that there's been a lot of job opportunities, and I think that we as parents want our children to have opportunities within our own communities. I think that having a local talent support kind of it opens their eyes of horizons for youth in our area in Saddleback Valley to the potential of working for agencies, municipalities, and that. So.
Is that a motion?
For discussion.
Is that a motion?
I'll make it a motion.
I'll second.
Okay, let's vote.
That motion carries unanimously.
Item 24, that's a big one. And that's not unlike item, what's it, item 20, it's another item in Table 4. The two of them come to $20 million, which is a lot of money, and goes back to our PCI discussion of the difference between 75 and 80. And so that sticking to the 80 is $20 million and change, and it's a lot of change. And going to the 75, what difference is that from a budgetary point of view?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. So when we ran our last pavement management report, we had 3 funding scenarios that we used, just to give you an idea. One is our current budget of about $1.6 million a year, and that's where it drops from an 80 to a 75 over the next 5 years. The maintaining the current PCI is at about $4.3 million a year, and then to increase it from 80 to 81 over the next 5 years was $5 million a year. So currently we have $1.6 million a year or so. If you add on, we're going to get SB 1 monies anyway, so I think it would be wise to just go ahead and include that. So that's $1.5 million, assuming it doesn't get repealed. So that 1.5, that brings us to $3.1 million a year. So that's somewhere in between the 75 and the 80. We haven't ran that scenario, but call it a 77, if you will. Still
Actually,
declining.
that's 1.5 and 1.3, that's 2.8, not 3.1.
And that's why he's the finance guy.
1.5 and 1.6?
Well, you're currently spending 1.6, but you're only getting 1.3 from M2. So the current projections for M2 for the next couple of years is about 1.3 a year, and the current projections for SB1 is 1.5, so it'd be 2.8.
So somewhere around 77-ish. We could run that scenario. So if you want to move to the next level, that would be the additional whatever is needed to get up to the 4.3. I'm not going to try to do that one on the fly. So that's upwards of, again, our about $4.3 million a year to keep it at the 80.
Well, that's the $20 million.
Right.
Right, and the question I ask is, if we go to 77 or 75, how much are we saving?
You would be saving the money from the general fund, because you'd just be spending the 1.3 from M2 and the 1.5 for SB1. So really,
We'd be saving $7.3 million if
you
we
would
did
be,
that?
yeah, you'd be saving the 7.3 million from the general fund.
And that gives us 75 or 77?
Well, to stay, what Tom said earlier is to stay, if you were just going to spend what you spend now, and this year, in the current fiscal year 17, we have 1.6 budgeted. We're using a little fund balance from the M2. That would keep you, if you were spending 1.6 a year, that would keep you at a 75, is what I understand.
You drop down to a 75.
You drop down. We're at an 80, and we'd kind of drop down to a 75. So if we're going to continue to spend 1.3, what we get in, plus add to 1.5, so you should be able to, I mean, mathematically, you would think you would stay anywhere from a 75 to an 80. I don't know where that lands in the model.
Right. We can model that, but for the sake of argument, say you're going to drop from the 80 that we are now down to a 77.
In 5 years?
Correct, using the SB1 funds.
Okay. Councilman Voigt is chaffing at the bit.
Give us an example of what are the extra costs you're going into. Are we slurry stealing on a more regular basis? And if we keep it at an 80, do we, the grinding of our asphalt is every, how many years is our stated grinding of the asphalt, or we actually blacktop it?
Sure. So there's the theoretical, which is, every 20 years you're going in there and fixing a road and grinding. And, each road in this city was built at a different time, different soil conditions. So the specifics are going through each road, and we have the report of what condition each road is in, by our maintenance areas. So, for instance, just some examples. In Zone A, we've got 3 streets that are poor, 22 that are fair. The majority are good and very good. So we have different aspects of all over the place. So what we'd be able to do with more money is keep more streets in the good and very good categories and slowly get rid of the poor streets.
So we're just upping the time frame for them to be grinded or slurry sealed.
Right. And over the longer term, right, you're saving money because you're able to fix streets while it's cheaper to fix them.
Which actually prolonging the life of the streets if you slurry seal more often?
Correct. And do the repairs more often while the
cheaper.
repairs are cheaper. When the small cracks are coming
You fill the cracks.
Yeah, if you can grind the 2 inches, it's better than letting it go forever, and then you got to reconstruct the whole base. So it's cheaper in the long run to do more preventative maintenance than long-term maintenance. Eventually, it all comes due at some point in time. The object is to fix these streets earlier in their failed state than later, which means money up front is worth more than money on the tail end. So there's no amount of money that we wouldn't want that would go to good use.
So with the trend lines that we have going, that our city is going in the trend lines of revenue, and not knowing what the financial state of the future is going to be, if we could save more money by keeping the streets longer, that's going to save labor and material costs in the long run.
Correct. Think of it as paying off a loan. Paying the money up front helps you in the longer run, but it's it's not cheap, and we realize that, and there's other strategies to use, and try to use grant funding and things of that nature also.
Questions?
Yes.
Mayor?
If say the SB1 bill does get repealed, when are we going to start receiving those funds? And secondly, if it does get repealed, do we have to give the funds back, or can we still use those funds? And, I mean, it's a valid question.
We will, this year we're going to receive about $490,000. It's not the full amount because it's only a half a year, started January 1st, 2018. In fiscal year 2018-19, the projections are around just under $1.5 million, $1,480,000. And that is the projections we'll receive that amount going forward for the next 10 years. Now, if SB1 is repealed, yes, we are back down to just using Measure M money, and that's roughly 1.3 escalating up to about 1.6 over the next 3 to 5 years.
When does Measure M done? 3 to 5, that's it?
Okay, say that again.
Measure M, how long is this Measure M going to continue?
Oh, Measure M,
perpetuity?
Measure M2, it goes through 2045 or something like that. A long time.
Okay.
The second part of your question, what money we would receive, we would keep. Going forward, if they repealed this, it would be a date when they would repeal it, and then you would stop going forward.
Okay.
A question for you, Tom. Are you projecting in the out years 3, 4, and 5 the increase in traffic? Because we're going to see that for sure as we go down certain streets. Definitely see an increase in traffic. It's going to affect that pavement category.
Sure, that's part of the traffic model that we use in the projections.
So I have a question with the saving the $7 million and 80, 79, 78, 77. So at the end of 5 years, we're at 75, let's say. Hopefully more, but let's say we end up going 1% a year. Does that mean in year 6 we're going to be 74? And then 73? Are we on a downward slope forever? Or when we hit 75, given our funding, do we stay at 75?
Typically, you'd certainly continue on your downward slope. The slope's always wanting to go down, right?
Oh, sure.
Remember, it's $5 million to get it up 1 point. So it's easy to go down. It's always going to continue to go down. Over time, it's going to go down more rapidly.
And what does, I know we saw this at the workshop, but for people listening or people here, what's the difference between 80 and 75? Can I see that difference? Or between 75 and 70? At what point is it a noticeable difference?
Well, it's hard to see a difference of 5, right? And this is an aggregate of the entire system is what we're talking about. So what you're going to do is you're going to see more and more streets at a 40, right? Less streets at an 85. You certainly can see that, right? 10 points, yeah, you can tell the difference, and you can see that. So this is the aggregate. We're trying to keep as many in the good category as possible. So you'll see more and more poor streets.
You gave a really good presentation at the planning meeting we did last year regarding this information. I thought it was well done, and it was understandable, and it made sense at that time, based upon your information, why we had decided to change to the 80% versus the 75% because of the cost savings over the long haul over several years, and how much more money we would have to spend to try to get back up to a healthy level. This actually made the most financial sense cost-saving wise to do it this way. So for that reason, I would like to make a motion that we approve the proposal for 1.625 this year, 1.894 the following year, and those thereafter.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? And I'd like to save $7.3 million on the one hand. On the other hand, we're saving it at the expense of our streets, and I get complaints now about the streets, and it's 80% already, and I get complaints, so I'm going to reluctantly go along, but I'm not happy. Vote, or any other comments?
Well, it just, I don't know if this will put your mind at ease or not, but, you know, I've made this statement a few times recently, but I don't think I've said it publicly. I feel like the city is in much better shape than it was 10 years ago, and it's a little less as nice as it was 10 months ago. And that's because of so many different factors, right? It's degrading road conditions. They just happen unless we're spending lots and lots of money. It's maybe not an increase in public safety calls. Maybe there is an increase, but you know, it's just how people feel about public safety these days. And you know, can we spend our way out of those problems? A lot of times we can't. Sometimes we can, especially when you're investing in something physical, you know, infrastructure. And you know, that's what we're supposed to do first and foremost as a city. In my mind, I mean, that's our number one priority. And folks can disagree, but it's public safety and infrastructure are the two most important things on my list. And so, you know, but at some point you only have so much revenue, and I understand that. And so at the end of this, we might have to talk about, okay, so do we need to find some more revenue, and how do we go about doing that? And you know,
well, that's my worry with escalating the police contract. So you came back 5, but they're renegotiating it, and if they came back at 8, oh my God! And then suddenly that $7 million looks good, but we can make a decision if that happened, and then go back and say, okay, we're trading police for roads. But
Sure.
At the moment, we don't have to.
Sure, and you know, those are the challenges that we have, and there's always some of the easy win, no-brainers that we all do, and then sometimes it gets really difficult when you're in a position where you're just financially strapped. We're doing better than a lot of cities, so we're not having to make those decisions as much today, but our projections are showing that we're going to have to over the next few years. So as we're looking at a variety of different items and how we're going to spend money, we need to be really careful about that. But I feel like infrastructure is one that makes sense.
Okay.
The country has not done that, and now we're talking about $1 trillion infrastructure bill for the country, and we have roads and bridges and things like that that are completely degraded around the country. So.
That motion carries unanimously.
Mr. Mayor, I believe this is the witching hour. Is it 9:30? Do we need to
Yes.
make a motion to continue?
We do.
All right,
Is
I'd make
your
that motion.
Okay, I'll second it. Let's vote on the motion to continue. I'll try to speed it up.
Mayor, so with that $7,307,000 out of your 23.5 million, you're at 13.6 million. Just give me the total.
Happy news. Anything else you got to say?
Not at this time.
Okay.
Until the next item comes up.
Well, the next item is there's no impact in years 1 and 2, and so unless there are any objections, I'll move along to Normandale.
Well, Mayor, when you say that, if there are no objections, so we would leave the 3.5
Yeah.
in year 3 and 3.5 in year 4 in our projections.
Right. I'm assuming everybody's familiar with where those costs go. It's a-
So that's going to bring us down to $6 million.
Yes, that was going to be my next point.
Yeah.
But we're committed to that.
Which I would need about that much cash flow to keep the city going on a month-to-month basis.
He's talking about the remaining $6 million. So I think what we're trying to subtly tell you is, Uncle, yes.
Well, yeah, wait for the next one. The next one, I'm going to say, let's scratch it
Yeah.
completely. I believe we're pretty well situated with parks already.
I agree.
We have 30, they're coming out of the yin-yang with parks.
So is that a motion, Mr. Mayor? I'll second.
The yin-yang part? No, that's not a motion. But scratching Normandale, at least in this, yeah, that would be a motion.
Can you help me understand, what is current public access to what is referred to as Normandale Park? Because I know that there's been a lot of people doing things that they weren't supposed to there. So what do we view as the public access to that property right now?
There is no current public, supposedly current public access to that property. That would be trespassing. There are signs up, there is a fence, but it is not completely fenced. There are some activities going on within Normandale right now.
Okay, and with that said, I mean, so would we cite someone for walking through there? Is that something that, you know?
You know, we've never taken that stance. You know, at this point, for us, it's an insurance liability question of what's going on there, and so the intention is that is closed. But we have not taken the step to remove things that have been built out there. If that's something that the council would like us to start looking at, we could do that, but we have not gone there to date.
Okay, and so the liability issue is just basically because of the terrain, I'm guessing? Is that
Yes.
for the most part? Okay.
The terrain and what's been
The reason why
may be
I'm
out there.
asking the question is that, you know, there's a natural, literally a natural park next to the San Juan Capistrano Dog Park, right? It's just tumbleweeds and, you know, it's flat out there. There's some old barn or something or another, and they call it a park, right? And they didn't make any improvements on it, but it's flat for the most part. There might be some areas that aren't, you know, and so, you know, it always bothers me that, you know, we could have some public land that isn't available to the public, even if it's just wilderness land, because it's still, you know, taxpayers' land. But I appreciate the liability issue, so, you know, it might be something to take a look at. But I'm sure there's a lot of people that looked at Whispering Hills land for a long time and said, we should just be able to go down there and do something, and, you know, and technically it was off limits to them, still is today, right? So, yeah, okay.
Okay, so we have a motion, and did we have a second?
Yes, second that.
Okay, and vote, please.
That's just to do nothing, right?
Yeah, do nothing for the next 5 years, at least for the next 2 years till they meet again.
Okay. All right.
That motion carries unanimously.
Okay, so now how do we look now?
But you're at $6,665,000 left in the general fund of unrestricted fund balance, and you've completed your general fund programs and projects.
Oh, no kidding. With $6 million, champagne for everyone.
Now, one thing I will bring up, and this is something we're going to really focus on as staff and come back to you with, we have a lot of ambitious projects that are happening all at the same time, and a lot of them are clustering around year 3. So we're opening a civic center, we're building Portola Park, we're building Whispering Hills. And so something might have to shift there. So internally, we'll take a look at it and see what we think we can do, and we'll bring back to the council. So the sequencing question, aside from the funding, just what are we capable of delivering as your staff?
Yeah, and we're already burdened for the next 2 years with a lot of stuff to do. I'd hate to think for the staff and everybody, the council and the finances, extending that to 3 years of doing so much. So it's a good point.
Yeah, at some point it can't be finals week every week.
Right.
You know, that's kind of the complaint I get at times.
Well, yeah, and my fear is that you can only work at that pace so long before you start making mistakes. And these are all big projects, and we can't afford to make, so we really can't extend that period too far. So, yeah, I appreciate your comments. Now, the rest of these items, do we need to go through them, or have we?
Well, as I went through the PowerPoint, the rest of the items are all sufficiently funded by one-time money. They're all restricted money for specific purposes. We can go through them and ask if you still want to do them, but I don't, I've kind of went through them in the PowerPoint. We can just quickly go through the table like you did the very first table and make a motion as a whole on the table.
Well, let me do the one that wasn't on the tables that we didn't go through, but you did mention, which is the bond. The bond. James Bond.
Okay.
The bond. So just repeat that for us. We owe how much, and if we pay it off, how much do we save?
On December 1st, 2018, the bond issue, you owe $6,655,000. That is the first call that you could pay it off. It's at a premium. There's a $65,000 premium, and that would cost the general fund $3.2 million, and that would cost the Fcpp fund $3.4 million. That is the split, because it was a 72-28 split for Alton Parkway, Fcpp general fund.
And the $3.2 million comes out of what?
The general fund unrestricted reserves.
And how much is in the unrestricted general fund reserves?
The $6.6 million that we currently have.
And what does $65,000 premium mean?
It says the bond is not at par yet. It hits par at 2021. So we're paying it off early. So you're paying the bondholders a premium to be able to pay it off early. It's a 4% bond. Currently, it's 3.95 or 3.90, almost 4% bond.
It's like a prepayment penalty. If you pay off your home loan early, you pay a little penalty to pay off early because you're paying less interest over time to the bondholders.
So, yeah, the savings there is we're paying them 4% and we're earning whatever we're earning, 1.2% or something like that.
We're about 1.4 now.
Okay, 1.4.
We're up a little. We'll keep going up each.
Right. So, yeah, so there's a 2.5% difference there on that much money over that many years. So, and that savings is how much? Is that
the savings on the bond is $1,014,000.
$1,014,000.
But that isn't all general fund. It's kind of split the same percentage, 72-28. So it's about $400,000, a little under $400,000 for the general fund, and then you would save $700,000 in Fcpp funds, which would help fund the last remaining 3 projects that are in the staff report.
Okay, so we'd be able to use that whole $1 million.
Yeah, you're using the whole $1 million to fund. The general fund would just put it in reserves. Fcpp, you would help fund the remaining 3 projects. And those are the last 3 remaining projects for the road fee program for the County of Orange. I think there was 20 in all when it began in 1987. And those would be the last 3 remaining projects. After that, they would shut down the program.
So at a cost of, let me summarize, at a cost of spending $3.2 million from the $6.6 million we have, we will save ourselves over the next X number of years $1 million in interest payments.
Yes. $400,000 from the general fund, roughly the rest from Fcpp funds.
And that will bring our general fund unrestricted down to $3.4 million. And how, is that a perilously low figure? Is that any other city would be tickled pink to have that, or what kind of a figure is that?
You're probably getting around to where other cities are at. We do still have the roughly $22 million in our reserve policy setting there per the policy, the 40%. But you're, for a city like it's probably getting a little low. You still need cash flow because of the flow of revenue that comes into the city and how it comes into the city monthly, twice a year for property tax. So, usually the first 6 months of the year you're spending more than you're bringing in because of the first increment coming in on property tax. So you do need a little cash flow to keep the city flowing, but we could work through it.
Well, but I guess my question would be how much in peril does it put us by reducing it from 6.6 to 3.4?
The only downside I would see is if you see a shift in the economy and But you do have your reserve funds to help you through that. You have economic contingency, you have an emergency fund, you have undesignated balance in the
How
general.
much is the emergency, 15? How
The
much is the emergency?
well, the emergency fund's only $3 million, but then there's undesignated, which is, hold on, I will tell you some exact figures. General fund undesignated or unrestricted that we keep in reserves. We have, at the end of June 30th, 2018, we'll have $13,385,000. Okay, and then general economic contingency, and that fund was set up so if any of the major property tax, or not property tax, sales tax payers in the city, one of the top 10, 2 of them move out. You have an economic contingency. You have about $6.6 million. And then you have a $3 million emergency reserve fund for any, natural disaster or any emergency that would happen in the city. That's about $22.5 million.
So I'm looking at the 5-year projections that you gave to us in the slide, and it's showing from 2018 to 2019, our operating expense, we got about $1.5 million surplus, so to speak, in that time frame. If we were to hypothetically pay,
that would add to the $3.6 million. You could be at $4.6 million by the end of 18-19 if that surplus holds.
okay.
And just, the last few years, we have come in spending less than what we've budgeted and brought in a little more revenue than what we have budgeted. So over the last few years, we've probably brought in anywhere from $1.5 million to $2 million, adding to fund balance that we did not have in the projections, just from certain savings, projects not getting done, and maybe pushing forward to the next year.
Well, I'll make a motion that we approve paying off the loan at the end of the year.
Yeah, I'll second that. It's not without comfort. I mean, it gives us we have much more comfort with that 6. On the other hand, it brings with it $1 million. And it seems as if we have sufficient reserves to handle that, and
And I would just say, remember, some of these projects are, the money is being spent over the 4 years. We push some of these projects out to the 5th year. The $3.5 million for the parks is in year 3 and 4. So your cash flow isn't all going down tomorrow. You're still going to have cash flow, and you have a few years ahead of you that you could still add to fund balance.
okay, there's a motion and a second. Do we have any comments or questions? Okay, I'll call for the vote.
That motion carries unanimously.
Well, I commend my fellow council members for being so courageous. There is a little discomfort in taking that much money out, but I agree with everybody. I think that's a wise investment, and the city will prosper from that. Does anybody feel the need to go through those tables, as the assistant city manager said?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Can we have a motion approving the remainder of the
Motion to
tables?
approve the remainder?
Second.
Okay. Discussion, vote. Somebody hasn't voted.
That motion carries unanimously.
All right. I think that's the, in a special meeting like this, do we do council comments? No, this is it. Well, thank you very much. This is, we got a lot achieved, and I think it all looks very good. So, thank you, and I'll see you next week.